Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is a wondrous place, full of magic, marvels, and mystery. But take even a shallow dive beneath the surface, and you'll find that this universe is far from the perfect fairy tale it appears to be at first glance. Today, let's take a closer look at one of the strangest phenomena in the wizarding world, the Ministry of Magic. Or rather, its ongoing, almost chronic inability to control things that, by all logic, should be under the strictest supervision. Ready? Then let's begin. Number 1, love potions. Legalized magical mind control. One of the most disturbing aspects of the saga remains the casual attitude toward love potions. In the Wizarding Society, no one seems to draw a clear line between a harmless prank and outright manipulation of consciousness. In Half-Blood Prince, we learn a chilling fact from Voldemort's past. His mother forced his father to fall in love with her using a potion. Later, Ron becomes the victim of a similar brew from a love-struck admirer. Funny? Only on the surface. In reality, it's a direct threat to free will, and it's strange that the Ministry not only ignores this danger, but essentially allows such potions to be sold openly. Number 2, transfiguring animals. A lesson in cruelty for second years. Few stop to think about what one second-year transfiguration lesson actually implies. Turning animals into objects is nothing short of cruelty. Professor McGonagall calmly teaches children how to turn living creatures into goblets. If it always worked perfectly, perhaps one could chalk it up to magical logic. But many students fail the spell, leaving the animals in bizarre, half-transformed states. Half alive, half dead. How is this acceptable? Where's the regulation? Where's the protection of magical creatures' rights, for that matter? Number 3, potions. Magical weapons with no registration. Potion making is powerful, truly powerful. One potion brings luck, another can alter your appearance beyond recognition. Some can even kill. But here's the shocking part. There is no clear control system for the production and distribution of potions. To compare, in the Muggle world, even strong painkillers require a prescription. But for wizards, brew what you like, a drop of luck a day or a litre of poison, no one's going to come knocking. Number 4, Weasley's wizard Wheezes. Fun but dangerously unregulated. Fred and George. Beloved by the public, clever, inventive, brilliant. But the shop they opened after school is, in essence, a ticking magical time bomb. Shelves stacked with explosive gadgets, fake illnesses, and instant darkness powder. Let's not forget that Draco Malfoy used one of their inventions to help Death Eaters infiltrate Hogwarts. And yet again, the Ministry remains silent, as if anyone could start selling dangerous magic, and no one would care. Number 5, dark magic shops. Legal business under official protection. There's one shop in Wizarding London that stood the test of time. Borgin and Burke's. A place where anyone can get their hands on cursed necklaces, poisons, and enchanted objects, all fully accessible to the public. Surely the Ministry must be aware of its existence. And yet the shop still operates. Arthur Weasley runs from house to house, searching for dangerous artifacts, but here, under everyone's nose, no one bothers to shut it down. Number 6, owlpost, a letter in a claw, and zero confidentiality. Owls are the wizarding world's version of old-fashioned postmen, charming, atmospheric, and totally vulnerable. Letter interception? Easy. Harry found out the hard way. Dolores Umbridge not only intercepted his message, but also harmed his owl. No encryption, no protection. So essentially, highly sensitive information is transmitted by birds that can be caught, injured, or manipulated, and no one files a complaint. Where's the magical equivalent of password-protected email? Number 7, broomstick flights. Freedom with no restrictions. Flying is a key part of wizarding culture, especially in Quidditch, but brooms aren't just for sport. They're a nearly unrestricted mode of travel with no licensing, no rules, and minimal oversight. To apparate, you need to pass an exam. To use the Flu network, you have to be connected to it. But a broom, just grab one and take off, no checks. Any teenager can hop on and soar, even across borders, especially if they don't want to be tracked. Number 8. Unregistered Animagi. Peter Pettigrew lived as a rat for 12 years, curled in Ron Weasley's pocket, sleeping beside him, eating from his plate. He watched the Weasley family, listened to the Order's secrets, and waited. As Scabbers, he escaped every rule, every trace. He wasn't just unregistered. He was invisible. The Ministry of Magic required Animagi to register their forms, but that law meant nothing without enforcement. Pettigrew, Sirius Black, and James Potter had all become Animagi as students. No one noticed, no one checked, and one of them helped resurrect Voldemort. Sirius Black, mistaken for a murderer, escaped Azkaban not with dark magic, but by slipping between bars as a dog. "I kept my mind," he told Harry, "and my form." He ran free for months, crossing borders, eluding capture, all because the Ministry never considered the loophole. Becoming an Animagus isn't easy, but once done, it offers freedom no spell can track. The fact that teenagers could pull it off in secret should have sparked reform. Instead, it exposed a truth. The Ministry made laws but didn't watch who was breaking them. Number 9. Use of time turners. Hermione Granger wore the time turner around her neck, hidden beneath her robes. With a single twist, hours slipped backward. She and Harry stood in the shadows, watching themselves sprint across the courtyard. "Does my hair really look like that from the back?" she whispered. The moment felt small, harmless, but it wasn't. Time travel was never harmless. One wrong move, one misstep, and history could break. Yet the Ministry of Magic, the very institution sworn to protect magical order, handed a time turner to a third-year student so she could take extra classes. Not a professor, not an unspeakable, a child. Later, in the Department of Mysteries, all the time turners shattered. A chaotic battle with Death Eaters knocked shelves to the ground, ending the Ministry's quiet hoarding of time. But the danger had been real long before that. Why was there no protocol? No magical insurance? No oversight? Time travel was treated like library access, and Hermione, one of the most brilliant witches of her age, admitted how close they came to disaster. "We must be very careful," she said. "No one can see us," because even she knew one wrong look could ruin everything. The Ministry didn't stop it. It just let it happen. Number 10. Muggle technology integration. The blue Ford Anglia shot across the sky, engine roaring, wheels spinning. Below, Muggles looked up in disbelief. Above, Harry and Ron clung to their seats, flying straight toward Hogwarts. The car, modified by Arthur Weasley, was never meant to be airborne, but it was, and no Ministry official stopped it. No magical barrier, no instant response. 2 underage wizards soared across half the country in a flying Muggle vehicle, completely unnoticed, until it crashed into the Whomping Willow. Arthur loved Muggle things. He worked in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office, yet he broke the very law he was hired to enforce. "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" he once asked Harry. Harmless curiosity, perhaps, but curiosity turned to experimentation, to enchantment, to potential exposure. If the Ministry truly feared Muggle awareness, why allow enchanted cars, radios, and plugs to exist in wizarding homes? Why turn a blind eye when Arthur charmed everything from batteries to teapots? The Order of the Phoenix operated in shadows. They used an old Muggle radio modified by Kingsley Shacklebolt and Lee Jordan. "River here, coming to you live on Potter Watch," Lee whispered into the microphone. That transmission reached ears across Britain, safe, secret, and Muggle-based. It wasn't the Ministry who provided communication during the war. It was wizard rebels using Muggle tools, the same tools the Ministry claimed were dangerous. The contradiction was stunning. Officially, wizarding law forbade contact with Muggle inventions. Unofficially, it happened every day. The problem wasn't the technology, it was the double standard. When Arthur used it, it was eccentric. When Muggles discovered it, it was a crisis. The Ministry didn't regulate the spread of Muggle objects. It simply pretended they didn't exist. Number 11. House Elf Rights. Dobby stood barefoot, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Dobby is free," he said, clutching the filthy sock Harry had tricked Lucius Malfoy into giving him. A sock. That was all it took to end a lifetime of servitude. In the wizarding world, Freedom for a house elf wasn't earned. It was granted if their master allowed it. These creatures cooked, cleaned, suffered punishments, and asked for nothing. But the Ministry of Magic never stepped in. There were no rights, no wages, no protections. They were property. Hermione saw it first. She founded SPIW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. She knitted hats and left them around the Gryffindor common room, hoping the elves would find them and win their freedom. But the other students laughed. Even Ron rolled his eyes. "You're trying to free people who don't want to be free," he told her. But that was the problem. The elves didn't even know they had a choice. Centuries of conditioning had erased the idea of rights. And the Ministry did nothing to change it. Creature, the Black family's bitter and broken servant, was a product of this neglect. He had been alone, ordered, abused. He spoke only in snarls and slurs. But when Harry treated him with kindness, not commands, something shifted. Master Regulus was kind to Creature, he whispered. And later he led the house elves of Hogwarts into battle against Voldemort, not because he had to, because he chose to. The difference was staggering. Still nothing changed, even after the war, even after Dobby died saving lives, buried with honor, and the words "a free elf" on his grave. No Ministry official ever proposed a bill, no reform, no rights. They celebrated the defeat of Voldemort, but ignored the slavery that stood in plain sight. House elves remained in kitchens and basements, silent, invisible, forgotten. Number 12. Safety at Hogwarts. The troll walked into the girls' bathroom on Halloween night. It was 12 feet tall, dragging a club, grunting with hunger. First years were wandering the corridors. No alarms, no protective spells, just panic. In Philosopher's Stone, Hermione was trapped. Harry and Ron, two 11-year-olds, faced the creature head-on. They won, barely. But where was the staff? Where was the Ministry? A wild troll had entered the castle and no one was prepared. Dumbledore later said, "The situation has been handled," as though near-death experiences were part of the curriculum. The next year, a monster slithered through the pipes, one that could kill with a glance. Students were petrified. One nearly died. The culprit? A basilisk, hidden inside Hogwarts for decades. The Ministry didn't investigate. They arrested Hagrid without evidence. They blamed Dumbledore and removed him, but they never fixed the real problem. It was Harry, Ron, and Hermione, children, who followed the clues, found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, and destroyed the beast. A school had turned into a hunting ground, and still no one from the Ministry thought to shut it down. Then came the Dementors. In Prisoner of Azkaban, these soul-sucking creatures floated around the castle, affecting students with trauma and depression. Harry fainted during every encounter. "I felt cold, like I'd never be happy again," he told Lupin. Yet the Ministry insisted they were there for protection. The same creatures that fed on fear and memories were stationed next to a school. And when one of them entered a Quidditch match, causing Harry to fall 50 feet from his broom, there were no consequences. By year 6, the Death Eaters had already infiltrated Hogwarts. Draco Malfoy smuggled them in with a vanishing cabinet. Dumbledore was killed in the astronomy tower. Severus Snape, a trusted professor, delivered the fatal blow. Number 13, magical creatures and their containment. The Forbidden Forest was meant to be off-limits, a place of danger whispered about in the halls of Hogwarts. But what no one said out loud, and what the Ministry never addressed, was that deep inside that forest lived Aragog, an acromantula, a creature so large its legs spanned over 15 feet. It wasn't hiding, it wasn't in a magical reserve, it was simply there, near a school filled with children. And when Hagrid led Harry and Ron into the forest in Chamber of Secrets, Aragog greeted them with 8 blinking eyes and a calm confession. "I never harmed a human, out of respect for Hagrid, but my children do not share my sentiments." The spiders closed in seconds later. Why didn't the Ministry act? They knew Aragog was no secret. Hagrid had raised him and Dumbledore had allowed it, but the Ministry never came, never moved him. never even acknowledged the risk. Until the threat reached the school's walls, they stayed silent, and that silence nearly cost 2 second-year students their lives. The regulation of magical creatures didn't exist. Not really. It was selective, reactive, and woefully behind the reality of what these beasts could do. Then came the dragons. In Goblet of Fire, the Triwizard Tournament introduced them like circus animals. Dangerous, proud, and barely contained. Harry faced the Hungarian horntail. It's one of the most aggressive species known. "It's not just a game," he whispered when he saw it. "It's suicide." The audience clapped, laughed, watched from stadium seats, unaware how close death had come. These weren't illusions. They were real dragons brought into a school setting for entertainment, and not a single ministry official raised a concern. Newt Scamander wrote Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them as a guide to magical creature safety. But the reality was different. For every law in that book there was an exception. Number 14, Legilimency and occlumency. Severus Snape stood in front of Harry Potter, his voice sharp and eyes colder than ever. "Clear your mind, Potter." It was not a suggestion. It was an order. With a flick of his wand and the word Legilimens, Snape invaded Harry's thoughts again, pulling forth images Harry didn't want to show anyone, his mother's screams, the cupboard under the stairs, the pain of isolation. And yet, this wasn't a battlefield. It was a classroom, no rules, no protection, just a teacher forcibly entering a student's mind lesson after lesson without any oversight. Legilimency is one of the most invasive magical abilities in the wizarding world. It allows the user to delve into someone's mind, see their memories, their fears, even their secrets. But while the unforgivable curses are strictly forbidden and regulated, Legilimency remains a grey area, no official license, no magical consent, and no real consequences for its abuse. Voldemort used it to manipulate and torture. Snape used it to train. Bellatrix Lestrange used it to extract secrets. Yet no one at the Ministry ever said a word. Harry never had a choice. He was told to resist Voldemort's connection, and the solution was to let another man forcibly pry into his soul. "He will come to you in dreams," Dumbledore warned, but offered no better option than Snape's cold instruction. The process wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry felt as though Snape had torn open his mind and rifled through it, leaving behind only a trail of anger and shame. This wasn't just a magical lesson, it was a violation. The Ministry of Magic turned a blind eye, no protective laws, no required supervision, no spell trace or regulation. A skilled Legilimens could live among others undetected, reading their private thoughts at will. Number 15. Bank security in Gringotts. For centuries, Gringotts' Wizarding Bank stood not only as a symbol of wealth and prosperity, but as the impenetrable heart of magical security. Nestled deep under the bustling cobblestone streets of Diagon Alley, its vaults were spoken of in whispers, impossibly deep, dangerously enchanted, and zealously guarded by goblins with no patience for thieves or fools. Yet in the final chapters of the Second Wizarding War, all illusions of invincibility shattered like glass. The heist executed by 3 teenagers, Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley, was not merely a daring adventure, but a revelation of the structural rot hidden behind centuries of pride and secrecy. On the surface, the intrusion seemed impossible. The vault of Bellatrix Lestrange, buried in the lowest caverns of Gringotts and protected by the thief's downfall and a massive Ukrainian iron belly, should have been impregnable. But the reality was far less reassuring. As Harry and his companions slipped past layers of magical protections, using a concoction of deception, disguise, and a few well-placed spells, the entire wizarding world witnessed the collapse of one of its most sacred institutions. A Polyjuice potion and the Imperious Curse, both long classified as dark and dangerous, proved sufficient to compromise what generations had trusted blindly. The implications of that heist ran far deeper than the loss of a single Horcrux. For if even a trio of fugitives, exhausted, hunted, and operating without the support of any established magical authority could subvert the defenses of the most guarded vault in the wizarding world, then what hope stood against those with actual resources, experience, and darker ambitions? It was not just a moment of triumph for the trio, but a moment of reckoning for every wizard, witch, and goblin who had ever deposited their treasures behind the enchanted walls of Gringotts. As the vault's contents, specifically Helga Hufflepuff's cup, multiplied uncontrollably due to the Gemino curse, a cascade of fake treasures buried the heroes in gold and goblets. But even this defense proved insufficient. In Rowling's words, the duplicates were not only useless but dangerous. The objects multiplied and burned with a white-hot intensity. The enchantments meant to deter thieves only slowed the intruders. They did not stop them. The Iron Belly dragon, intended as a living weapon of deterrence, became a vehicle of escape, its chains broken, its loyalty broken, its fire lighting the sky above Diagon Alley in a moment that would be remembered as the bank's darkest hour. What failed Gringotts was not a lack of magic, but a lack of foresight. The goblins' pride, their disdain for human unpredictability, and their obsession with tradition over innovation all culminated in a system so rigid it could be shattered with enough boldness. No one questioned goblin authority over the bank. There were no checks, no ministry-led inspections, no external review boards or magical audits. In the end, Gringotts was an island unto itself, guarded not by transparency but by fear. And fear, as history has shown time and time again, is a brittle shield. It is telling that neither the goblins nor the ministry took any steps to recover or fortify the bank after the break-in. There were no reforms, no public statements, no apologies to the depositors whose faith was betrayed. The goblins resumed business as usual, and the wizarding public, bruised by war and desperate for normalcy, allowed it. But trust once broken does not heal on its own. Gringotts never addressed the uncomfortable question now lurking in every vault owner's mind. If Harry Potter could break in, who else might be watching from the shadows, preparing to do the same? Among the many overlooked facets of this security collapse is the fact that goblins do not share the same understanding of possession as wizards. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Griphook makes this belief clear. Wizarding treasure belongs to goblins. Anything made by goblins is considered by them to be rightfully theirs. This ideological gap is not just cultural, it is a legal and moral abyss. By entrusting one's gold, heirlooms and magical items to goblin care, wizards assume protection. Goblins, in contrast, may view themselves as merely custodians of what they already believe to be theirs. The Lestrange vault may have been guarded, but was it ever truly protected with intent? Further complicating the matter is the goblins' ambivalence toward wizarding law. Their loyalty lies with gold, not governance. During the final war, Griphook agreed to assist Harry and his friends not out of allegiance, but in exchange for the sword of Godric Gryffindor, an object he believed had been wrongfully taken from his people. That a key figure in Gringotts' internal structure would willingly aid in a robbery exposes how thin the bank's ethical and protective veneer truly is. The security, in the end, was only as strong as the goblins' belief in its sanctity. This is not to diminish the historical significance of Gringotts. Established in the 1400s by the goblin Gringott, the bank has long been a pillar of wizarding finance. Its vaults extend deep beneath the earth, protected by labyrinthine passageways, complex enchantments, and, until recently, a powerful reputation for inviolability. But reputation is not armor, it is illusion, and the events of 1998 laid bare the cracks long hidden beneath centuries of unchallenged authority. What is perhaps most alarming is the absence of any regulatory oversight. In the Muggle world, banks are subject to layers of scrutiny, financial audits, security checks, compliance laws. The wizarding world, despite its reliance on a single financial institution, imposes no such structure. The Ministry of Magic, so quick to interfere in other sectors of magical life, remains conspicuously silent when it comes to Gringotts. Whether out of fear, political inertia, or sheer negligence, this silence endangers every witch and wizard who entrusts the bank with their livelihood. Number 16. Personal magical artifacts. Of all the peculiarities in the wizarding world, the regulation, or lack thereof, of magical artifacts for personal use remains one of the most baffling. These objects, often containing immense power, are scattered across the globe in private hands, with little to no oversight from the authorities meant to ensure magical safety. The question thus arises: why has the Ministry of Magic not established a comprehensive system to monitor, register, and regulate artifacts such as time-turners, invisibility cloaks, or even wands? The implications of this negligence ripple across wizarding history, shaping events both tragic and triumphant. The most notorious case that highlights this lapse in magical regulation involves none other than Lord Voldemort. His wand, made of yew and phoenix feather, passed through the hands of Mikhail Grigorovich before it was stolen by a young Tom Riddle. This theft, significant in itself, did not provoke a ministry investigation. Grigorovich was a registered wand-maker, and the loss of such a potent wand, particularly one with a twin core to that of Harry Potter's, should have raised alarms, but it didn't. There was no ministry-led search, no reports filed, no alerts sent to other magical institutions. Voldemort disappeared with the wand, and with it, an untold number of lives were lost. How could such a powerful magical object vanish without a trace in a society that prides itself on secrecy and control? Wands, of course, are intensely personal instruments, and Ollivander himself once said, "The wand chooses the wizard." But that does not excuse the lack of a tracking system. The Ministry monitors underage magic, uses the trace to detect spells in the presence of Muggle technology, and even regulates the transportation of dangerous magical creatures, yet a wand stolen by a criminal mastermind. Unmonitored, the inconsistency is glaring. This problem extends beyond wands. Consider time-turners, perhaps the most dangerous magical artifacts ever permitted for civilian use. With a simple twist, time itself can be rewritten. And yet in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, one such device is loaned to Hermione Granger, a third-year student, without any serious safeguards. Dumbledore himself urges caution, instructing her never to be seen. But this is not protection, it is hopeful avoidance. The Department of Mysteries is said to regulate time-turners, yet their vault was destroyed during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries with little resistance. If these items were so vital, why were they stored without proper defense? It becomes even more puzzling when examining the case of the invisibility cloak. Harry Potter, from the moment he receives the cloak during his first year at Hogwarts, uses it freely and often, within the school and beyond. The cloak, later revealed to be one of the 3 Deathly Hallows, is an artifact of legendary power, said to conceal the wearer from death itself. "You have the cloak from your father," Dumbledore once said. "It is a unique item." Unique indeed, but why didn't the Ministry intervene? Even if they were unaware of its legendary origin, the ability to vanish without a trace would be of immediate interest to law enforcement. Surely such a cloak would be illegal in most wizarding jurisdictions. The use of magical artifacts without oversight has led to catastrophe on more than one occasion. The Cursed Diary of Tom Riddle, a simple-looking book, but in truth a Horcrux, possessed Ginny Weasley, and nearly resulted in the death of Muggle-born students at Hogwarts. Again, no ministry regulation prevented this artifact from passing through the hands of Lucius Malfoy, who slipped it into Ginny's cauldron unnoticed. How can an object capable of soul possession and memory manipulation be so easily transferred? Why are there no magical customs inspections, no artifact registries? Perhaps the most telling moment comes in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry and Hermione visit Bathilda Bagshot's home in Godric's Hollow. There, hidden inside Bathilda's corpse, lies Nagini, Voldemort's snake, waiting to attack. They are nearly killed, and yet their only magical protection is what they bring with them. No ministry safehouse, no aura surveillance, no artifact detection spells. The ministry has fallen at this point, of course, but even before its collapse, its approach to personal magical items was reactionary at best. It's not merely about the danger of these artifacts in the wrong hands. It's also about fairness and accountability. When the Weasley twins develop magical products like extendable ears or skiving snack boxes, they are subject to raids by the Ministry, inspections by Dolores Umbridge, and attempts to shut down their business. Yet Death Eaters carry dark marks, enchanted masks, and cursed coins without any meaningful resistance. There is a clear double standard. Personal magic is either criminalized or ignored based on the user's status, not the object's power. A darker irony unfolds when examining the fate of Sirius Black. He was imprisoned in Azkaban without trial, allegedly for the murder of Peter Pettigrew. Yet no one investigated the wand that cast the spell. No magical signature was checked, no artifact trace conducted. In fact, the Ministry never even discovered that Pettigrew was alive, living as a rat in the home of a Ministry employee. Had they performed even a cursory investigation of Black's possessions, or a registry search, they may have uncovered the truth much earlier. Regulation does exist in isolated pockets. Broomsticks must be registered under the Broom Regulatory Control Office. A magical creature ownership requires permits, but even these are easily circumvented. Buckbeak, a hippogriff, was nearly executed due to Lucius Malfoy's influence, despite following Hagrid's guidance. Meanwhile, no one asks where Fred and George obtained their Peruvian instant darkness powder. Regulation exists, but enforcement is another matter. The wizarding world's obsession with secrecy often trumps logic. They fear exposure to Muggles more than internal chaos. Thus, powerful objects are hidden, not secured. The Elder Wand, a legendary artifact with a blood-soaked history, passed from Grindelwald to Dumbledore, then to Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter, without the Ministry ever knowing. Its last known location before Grindelwald was a corpse in a grave. How could such a deadly wand pass silently through history? Number 17. Magical diseases and epidemics. When the magical world is spoken of with awe and admiration, people often picture the grandeur of Hogwarts, the wonders of Diagon Alley, or the raw power of spells and potions. Rarely, however, does the conversation drift toward the shadows that linger behind the glittering veil. Shadows in the form of magical diseases and uncontrolled epidemics. In truth, beneath the surface of charm and enchantment lies a deeply flawed healthcare system, plagued not by a lack of knowledge or talent, but by a dangerous absence of organization, preparedness, and state responsibility. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries may be a sanctuary for the sick, but it stands alone, isolated, without any indication of broader systemic support from the Ministry of Magic. Consider dragonpox, a disease so common in the wizarding world that even the elderly seem resigned to it as a cause of death. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Albus Dumbledore tells Tom Riddle that his mother died shortly after childbirth, and that his father abandoned him, but we later learn of other characters such as Abraxas Malfoy, who succumbed to dragon pox. It's described almost casually, as if such a severe, disfiguring disease were merely a part of life. Yet there is no mention of vaccination programs, no public announcements, no quarantine measures. The magical world's response to this disease seems medieval at best, despite the very real, very magical capabilities of their healers. Lycanthropy, commonly known as werewolfism, is another glaring example of neglect. The case of Remus Lupin stands as both a personal tragedy and a political disgrace. Bitten as a child by the sadistic Fenrir Greyback, Lupin spent a lifetime on the fringes of society, not because the disease was uncontrollable, but because the Ministry failed to implement basic policies of inclusion and medical support. Wolfsbane Potion, a complex but effective remedy that allows werewolves to retain their minds during transformation, was invented by Damocles Belby, yet access to it remained limited, expensive, and stigmatized. The Ministry never distributed it widely, nor did it launch education campaigns to destigmatize lycanthropy. Instead, it pushed werewolves into the margins, where they either became pariahs or, like greyback, predators. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, which should have been in charge of such issues, treated werewolves not as patients, but as threats. "They think we're all dangerous," Lupin once said. "They think we're all the same. In a world that can magically regrow bones overnight, or reverse petrification, the inability, or unwillingness, to manage lycanthropy humanely and effectively reveals a deeper systemic rot. It's not just a failure of medicine, it's a failure of morality and governance. Beyond these well-known diseases lie even more obscure and chilling afflictions. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the concept of obscurials is introduced. Children whose magical abilities have been violently suppressed, resulting in a parasitic force that ultimately destroys them. Obscurials are not just metaphorical representations of trauma, they are literal magical epidemics born from repression and neglect. The fact that these cases were not catalogued, studied, or even publicly acknowledged by the British Ministry during the events of the Harry Potter series indicates a breathtaking level of institutional apathy. Newt Scamander was one of the few who took these cases seriously, but he acted as an individual, not as part of any state-sanctioned initiative. And then there are the lingering, silent consequences of dark magic. Curses that twist the body and mind beyond recognition. Spells that once misfired or misused leave permanent damage. One need only remember the fate of Alice and Frank Longbottom, tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange's Cruciatus curse. Despite their condition, they were not housed in a specialized magical care unit. Instead, they were left in the Janus Thicky ward, effectively warehoused in St. Mungo's with little hope for a cure. No breakthroughs, no ministry-led research, just silence. Even the aftermath of Voldemort's reign brought no serious medical reckoning. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, suffered from lingering injuries, mental trauma, and magical afflictions. But where was the magical equivalent of post-war rehabilitation? Where were the healing centers, the trauma wards, the national health initiatives? The ministry seemed more preoccupied with propaganda and image repair than with tending to its wounded. Then there are the absurd but terrifying magical side effects of spells gone wrong. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when the Weasleys visit the Dursleys to pick up Harry, Fred and George drop a tongue toffee that causes Dudley Dursley's tongue to swell to 4 feet in length. While hilarious in the context of the story, such an event, in the real world, would demand immediate medical oversight. But the magical world, lacking any standard emergency protocols, has normalized these kinds of magical accidents. The magical plant Spattergroit is another example of negligence. It is mentioned in Half-Blood Prince as a highly contagious disease, yet no clear prevention, cure, or public health strategy is discussed. Ron even uses it as an excuse to avoid going to Slughorn's party. But the fact that it's widely known enough to be used as a lie and serious enough to be believed without question shows that it's a recognized threat, one that still seems to lack a centralized ministry response. When Gilderoy Lockhart suffers a severe memory curse at the hands of his own wand, his condition too becomes permanent. In Order of the Phoenix, he is still in St. Mungo's, with no sign of a research effort to reverse the spell. Given the wizarding world's supposed advancements, this lack of medical initiative is more than puzzling. It's alarming. Even something as simple as spell backfires can be lethal. The accidental splinching of young witches and wizards learning to apparate leads to missing limbs and dangerous bleeding. While the ministry oversees apparition lessons, it does not seem to take the risk seriously enough to assign healers or provide magical medics during training. It is treated as a learning hazard, not a medical emergency. Number 18, Curses and Forbidden Magic in Daily Life. In the quiet corners of the wizarding world, where the laws of magic meet the shadows of human nature, there exist spells so dark and vile that they are named unforgivable. A mere whisper of their names, Avada Kedavra, Imperius, Cruciatus, can drain colour from a wizard's face. But while these curses are legally prohibited, feared, and supposedly monitored, the truth is far murkier than the Ministry of Magic would care to admit. The unforgivable curses are meant to be the magical world's final taboo. Avada Kedavra kills instantly, without pain, without defense. The Imperious Curse robs a person of free will, bending them into a puppet of the caster's whims. The Cruciatus Curse induces unbearable agony, shredding a victim's sanity with invisible claws. Their classification as unforgivable is meant to reflect the absolute moral boundaries they cross. But are these boundaries enforced with equal determination for every witch and wizard? The tragic story of Frank and Alice Longbottom suggests otherwise. Frank and Alice, both brave Aurors, stood firm against Voldemort's followers during the First Wizarding War, but their resistance cost them dearly. After Voldemort's fall, Bellatrix Lestrange, along with Rodolphus Rabastan and Barty Crouch Jr., captured the Longbottoms. They used the Cruciatus Curse until the victims' minds broke beyond repair. This was not an act of passion. It was an orchestrated performance of cruelty, a deliberate obliteration of identity. The damage was permanent. Frank and Alice were confined to St. Mungo's, unable to recognize even their son, Neville. Curiously, the perpetrators were only brought to justice after Voldemort's defeat. During his reign, no one dared act against his loyalists. The Ministry's silence wasn't just fear, it was complicity. Bellatrix proudly admitted her actions during her trial. "The Dark Lord will rise again," she declared, eyes gleaming with devotion. Her words weren't a confession, they were a threat, a promise of return. And until that regime crumbled, the use of unforgivable curses remained, in some circles, an acceptable tool of control. This wasn't an isolated case. Many known Death Eaters wielded these curses with impunity. Lucius Malfoy, a high-ranking follower of Voldemort, claimed he had been under the Imperious Curse himself to evade imprisonment. The irony was grotesque. The man who had likely used the curse on others now used its very existence as a shield. The Ministry, desperate to restore order, accepted his excuse with alarming ease. In a society built on appearances, Lucius's wealth and influence outshone any whispers of guilt. But what happens beyond the polished halls of the Wizengamot? In the back alleys of Knockturn Alley or the windswept moors of the Scottish Highlands, who ensures these laws are upheld? The truth is unsettling. The Ministry has no reliable system for detecting the use of unforgivable curses. The Trace, a magical monitoring system for underage magic, only applies to young witches and wizards, and even that is tied to their location rather than their wand. Adults, unless caught in the act or reported by a witness, can wield dark magic without fear of automatic detection. Consider the case of Caro's siblings Alecto and Amicus during their tenure at Hogwarts under Snape's nominal headmastership. These two were placed as educators, but their methods were anything but academic. Students were routinely subjected to the Cruciatus Curse as punishment. Neville Longbottom, Ginny Weasley, and others from Dumbledore's army endured these horrors. Yet the Ministry, under Death Eater control at the time, allowed this freely. After Voldemort's fall, they were imprisoned, but no official record specifies exactly when or how many children were tortured. No restorative justice was offered. Even before Voldemort's return, cases of unforgivable curses slipped through the cracks. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Professor Moody, who was in fact Barty Crouch Jr. using Polyjuice Potion, demonstrated all three curses in a Hogwarts classroom. "Now the Cruciatus Curse," he said, before casting it on a defenseless spider. The demonstration sent shudders through students, especially Neville. No alarms were triggered, no Ministry owls arrived. The act, technically illegal, was excused under the premise of education, but it raises a dangerous precedent. Context determines legality, not the act itself. In private households and rural wizarding communities, stories circulate, never confirmed, always denied, about altercations ending in silence, obedience, or death. An angry wizard pushed too far, using the Imperious Curse on a cheating spouse. a bitter feud between families ending with a whisper of Avada Kedavra in the fog. The spells leave no trace that Muggle forensics could follow, and without a witness, the Ministry has no means of investigation. Constant vigilance, Mad-Eye Moody warned, but even he would admit that surveillance fails in isolation. Perhaps the most unsettling example of this selective enforcement is the case of the Lestrange Vault in Gringotts. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione infiltrate the bank, they uncover the Horcrux cup hidden within, an object tied to Voldemort's soul. The protections on that vault included dark magic of ancient origin, possibly derived from cursecraft not dissimilar to the Unforgivable curses. Yet no investigation into the magical contents of high-security vaults ever made headlines. Was it fear of Gringotts, a blind spot born of policy and tradition, or willful ignorance? Magic, after all, reflects intent as much as technique. A charm can heal or harm depending on its use. But the Unforgivable curses are unique in that their intent must be pure in its evil. "You have to mean them," Bellatrix once said, grinning. "It's not enough to speak the words. The spell only works if the caster truly wants to torture, control, or kill. That fact alone should make detection easier, yet it doesn't. How does the Ministry police thoughts? It doesn't. And therein lies the loophole that every dark witch and wizard exploits. In the battle of the Department of Mysteries, Harry and his friends were outmatched and unprepared. But even then Harry attempted the Cruciatus curse on Bellatrix. It failed, not because he lacked power, but because he lacked the true intent. "You need to really want to cause pain, to enjoy it," she taunted. This moment reveals a terrifying truth that the power of dark magic lives not in words, but in the soul's willingness to violate. If a young wizard can't perform it without hatred, how many older, bitter wizards do? The Ministry's failures aren't just about policy, they're about denial. In Order of the Phoenix, when Voldemort returns and Harry tries to warn the public, the Ministry silences him. They smear Dumbledore, punish Harry, and claim order remains. But this denial extends to dark magic enforcement too. It's easier to pretend evil is gone than to admit that it hides behind well-pressed robes and family names. After all, how many Death Eaters truly faced Azkaban after the Second Wizarding War? When Severus Snape killed Dumbledore atop the Astronomy Tower, it was with the Avada Kedavra curse. The green flash, the silence, the body falling. There was no ambiguity. Yet Snape had been a double agent, trusted by both sides. His act, revealed later to be part of a pact with Dumbledore, went unpunished. Did the end justify the means, or did his position buy him a clean slate? The Unforgivable curse was cast, but context, once again, erased the legal line. The case of Draco Malfoy is another sobering example. Tasked with assassinating Dumbledore, Draco failed to cast the killing curse. His hand shook, heart faltered. Yet his father had no such hesitation. Lucius's wand had cast spells that killed, tortured, and controlled. But the post-war trials barely touched him. His crimes were buried beneath wealth, apologies, and a vague promise of reformation. The system wasn't built to protect the innocent. It was built to forgive the powerful. Even in the Ministry's own operations, unforgivable curses have found their place. During the Second Wizarding War, auras were authorized to use these curses against Death Eaters. Harry himself, hunting Horcruxes, used the Imperious curse to infiltrate Gringotts. It was the only way, he later justified. But where is the line if even the boy who lived crossed it? What does that teach future generations? That rules bend when the cause feels righteous. These contradictions create a dangerous precedent. The unforgivable curses are not as forbidden as they appear. They are tools, illegal only when politically inconvenient, prosecuted only when witnessed by the wrong people. In practice, their use is determined not by law, but by narrative, who used them, on whom, and why. The wizarding world loves to pretend that its laws are firm, but history tells another story. Behind every statute is a story of silence. For every Bellatrix punished, 10 others vanish into the shadows. The Ministry's inability or unwillingness to monitor these curses in remote areas opens a chasm of injustice. The countryside of Wales, the forests of Eastern Europe, the hills of northern Scotland, all places where magic happens unseen. What occurs there is not fantasy, it's forgotten history. Ultimately, the existence of the unforgivable curses within domestic life is more common than the public believes. Their whispered uses go unrecorded, unpunished, often undetected. Their existence, like the Death Eaters who used them, has not been erased by Voldemort's fall. Instead, they linger, quiet and dormant, waiting for Cruelty to stir them awake once more. Number 19. Hogwarts Curriculum. Oversight. The great castle of Hogwarts, looming over the Scottish Highlands, has always been more than just a school. It is a symbol of wonder, tradition, secrecy, and above all, autonomy. For centuries, it operated as a bastion of magical learning, far from the clutches of Muggle-style bureaucracy. But this proud independence, while romantic, raises a sobering question. Who truly oversees what happens within its ancient walls? One might assume that the Ministry of Magic, as the governing body of the British wizarding community, would maintain rigorous oversight over Hogwarts' curriculum and faculty. After all, children there are taught to wield powerful magic, some of it deadly. Yet time and again Hogwarts has functioned as its own isolated realm, answering to no consistent standard of evaluation. It is a place where a werewolf was entrusted with the education of third years, a Death Eater was permitted to walk the corridors for decades, and a fraudulent charlatan was hired to teach defensive magic. These are not isolated incidents, they reflect a systemic failure of oversight and an alarming pattern of negligence. Consider the case of Remus Lupin. Appointed as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor in Harry Potter's third year, Lupin was, by all accounts, a skilled and compassionate teacher. Students respected him, and for the first time in years they were genuinely learning useful defensive spells. But Lupin harbored a dangerous secret. He was a werewolf. Not a dark wizard by any means, but a man who transformed monthly into a creature known to attack indiscriminately. There were precautions, of course, potion regimens, secret retreats, but they were managed solely by Lupin and Headmaster Dumbledore. The Ministry was not informed, parents were not informed, the Board of Governors was not informed. It was only when Severus Snape let the truth slip that Lupin resigned, recognizing the public outcry that would follow. "Parents will not want someone like me teaching their children," he said, with resignation. And yet no authority had asked questions before his appointment, no background checks, no disclosures. It was a decision made in complete opacity. Even more astonishing is the tenure of Severus Snape himself, a man who served Voldemort as a Death Eater, marked with the Dark Mark, and who maintained close contact with both the Order of the Phoenix and the enemy throughout the Second Wizarding War. Snape's moral complexity is undeniable. He was ultimately a double agent acting for Dumbledore, but his presence in the castle, teaching children for nearly 2 decades, is deeply troubling when viewed through the lens of governance. He bullied students, showed blatant favoritism, and in many cases created a toxic classroom environment. Neville Longbottom's boggart turned into Snape, not a dark creature or a nightmare, but his teacher. This alone speaks volumes, and still the Ministry never intervened. No inspections, no inquiry, no evaluations of teaching standards. Snape was Dumbledore's man, and that was apparently enough. And then there is the case of Gilderoy Lockhart, perhaps the most damning example of the school's flawed hiring practices. A man with a dazzling smile, a cabinet full of awards, and not a single real credential. Every feat he claimed, battling banshees, defeating trolls, vanquishing werewolves, was a lie. He had used memory charms to steal the achievements of others. His incompetence was so profound that he once attempted to erase the memories of 2 12-year-olds and backfired the spell onto himself. "I really can't remember what I've done," he confessed in St. Mungo's, long after his fraud had been exposed. That such a man could pass even a cursory interview for a position at the most prestigious magical school in the country is absurd. But again, there was no certification system in place. No ministry regulation to verify his background or credentials. Dumbledore, out of necessity or desperation, simply hired him. Hogwarts seems to operate less like a school under governmental jurisdiction and more like a fiefdom ruled by its headmaster. Albus Dumbledore, despite his brilliance and good intentions, often acted unilaterally. When he hired Lupin, he ignored potential risks. When he kept Snape, he ignored public perception. When he allowed Harry to face mortal danger in school year after school year, he placed the greater good above individual safety. There were no checks, no balances, and the ministry? It watched from afar, sometimes skeptical, sometimes approving, but rarely intervening. It is only when the Ministry of Magic perceived a political threat from Hogwarts that it chose to act, and even then its methods were clumsy and authoritarian. Dolores Umbridge was appointed as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor in Harry's 5th year, not out of concern for pedagogy, but to suppress dissent. The Ministry feared Dumbledore's influence and Harry's growing notoriety, so it installed Umbridge as an agent of control, but she did not improve education. She gutted it. Her lessons were reduced to rote memorization. She banned practical magic. Students were forbidden to use wands in class. "Wands away," she said coldly. "You have no need to practice spells." In a subject designed to prepare students to defend themselves, this was nothing short of sabotage. Under Umbridge, Hogwarts transformed into an Orwellian nightmare. Inquisitorial squads roamed the halls. Students were punished with torture. The phrase "I must not tell lies" was etched into Harry's skin, not metaphorically but literally, by a blood quill she forced him to use. No competent educational system would allow such abuse. But again, there was no system. There was only the minister's paranoia and Umbridge's cruelty. The result was disaster. When the ministry sent inspectors, they were political puppets, not educators. There was no curriculum review board, no independent agency of magical education. The Wizarding Examinations Authority existed, yes, but it focused only on the standardized OWL and NEDUT exams. It had no say in who taught, how they taught, or what they taught between tests. In other words, students were judged, but teachers were not. A 5th year could be failed for imperfect spellcasting, but a professor could teach false information with impunity, as Lockhart did, or refuse to teach at all, as Umbridge did. The double standard is glaring. Hogwarts, for all its mystique, is a dangerous place. Students face trolls in the dungeons, giant spiders in the Forbidden Forest, and dragons in school-sanctioned tournaments. They brew dangerous potions, practice hexes, and study magical creatures that, in the words of Hagrid, could kill you in seconds. And yet the institution remains structurally fragile. When Sirius Black escaped Azkaban, there were no drills, no lockdown protocols. When the Chamber of Secrets was opened, classes continued with no real investigation. When students were attacked, Dumbledore was temporarily removed, but no safety committee was formed. Chaos ruled until a child solved the mystery. This culture of reaction rather than prevention defines Hogwarts governance. Only when tragedy strikes does the administration respond. Cedric Diggory dies during the Triwizard Tournament? The event is never held again. The Forbidden Forest harbours deadly creatures. It remains off-limits, yet students are frequently sent there for detention. No risk assessments, no hazard reports, only tradition and improvisation. Even the magical curriculum itself is subject to the whims of individual teachers. When Snape teaches potions, it is an exercise in fear and intimidation. When Slughorn teaches the same subject, it becomes a lively, engaging discipline. The same applies to Defense Against the Dark Arts. Depending on the teacher, it ranged from practical dueling, Lupin, to farce, Lockhart, to tyranny, Umbridge. There is no baseline, no guarantee. The subject of transfiguration remained stable largely because of Professor McGonagall's competence. But what if she had left? Who would have filled the role? What would they have taught? The magical world, despite its enchantment, seems woefully behind in institutional management. There is no equivalent of a school board, no parental advisory group, no Educational Oversight Committee. Wizarding children are sent off at 11 to live in an ancient castle with no contact with the outside world for months. Letters are delivered by owl, but phone calls, internet, parent-teacher meetings? None. One cannot help but feel that Wizarding Society's distrust of the Muggle world has led to an intentional refusal to adopt its more reasonable systems of accountability. When Umbridge rose to power, the chaos of her tenure ironically revealed the very vacuum of power she sought to control. If there had been a proper educational system in place, clear standards, certified training, teacher evaluations, her reign would not have been possible. She exploited a gap that had existed for centuries, and while her methods were deplorable, her position was legitimized by the Ministry's failure to act sooner. In the end, Hogwarts survives not because of its structure, but in spite of it. It endures because of the dedication of a few good professors, McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, and yes, even Dumbledore, who operate with personal integrity in a system without rules. But that is not a system. That is luck. And in a world where children learn to cast spells that can immobilize, disarm, or even kill, luck is a poor substitute for oversight. It is telling that after the Second Wizarding War, the reforms to Hogwarts governance were never clearly described. The books end with a hopeful glimpse of the next generation, but no sign of institutional change. Did the Ministry finally step in to protect future students? Did the Board of Governors establish standards for hiring and curriculum? We do not know. The silence is either an omission or an answer in itself. As much as Hogwarts is a place of learning and growth, it is also a microcosm of the wizarding world's deep resistance to reform. It clings to tradition, celebrates individualism, and fears scrutiny. But education, especially magical education, requires more than ancient rituals and noble headmasters. It requires responsibility, structure, vision. Otherwise, the next Lupin, the next Lockhart, the next Umbridge may already be walking those hallowed halls, waiting for no one's permission. Number 20, memory charms and mind manipulation. There is a certain coldness to the spell Obliviate, a chilling simplicity that belies its horrifying implications. One swift flick of the wand, and entire portions of a person's life vanish into nothingness. In the wizarding world, memory is disturbingly malleable. A person's very sense of self, relationships, trauma, joy, identity can be rewritten or erased with a mere incantation. Wizards, particularly those in positions of power, wield this ability with the casual detachment of someone swatting a fly. But memory is not a fly. Memory is the architecture of the soul. Consider the case of Gilderoy Lockhart, one of the most striking examples of how Obliviate can be twisted for personal gain. Lockhart was not just a liar, he was a thief of identity. According to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, he wasn't lying when he said he'd done all those things. He really had done them, but only after stealing other wizards' stories and memories. He tracked down genuinely heroic witches and wizards, extracted their stories, and then used Obliviate to render them silent forever. Their memories, sometimes of entire quests, dragons, banshee battles, were wiped clean, leaving Lockhart free to publish their lives as his own adventures. This is not mere vanity, this is psychological theft on a grotesque scale. Each of those victims woke up missing chunks of their lives, confused, disoriented, forever altered. Some, like the old warlock who once defeated the Wagga Wagga werewolf, might never know why their minds no longer fit together quite right. The Ministry of Magic never prosecuted Lockhart. Even after his exposure, he was sent quietly to St. Mungo's, himself a victim of backfired magic, but with no public trial or inquiry. The silence surrounding this is as disturbing as the spell itself. Memory alteration is so normalized in magical society that entire government departments are built on its routine use. The Accidental Magic Reversal Squad and the Obliviator Headquarters, part of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, are tasked with wiping the minds of Muggles who witness magic. A dragon breaks free in a London park. Obliviate the crowd. A giant smashes through a coastal village. Obliviate the survivors. There's an assumption that as long as the memory is gone, the damage is undone, but that's a dangerous illusion. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, during the chaos at the Quidditch World Cup, Death Eaters rampage through the Muggle campsite. The Roberts family, Muggles running the grounds, were tortured and humiliated. Arthur Weasley later said, "We'll have to obliviate them. Not console, not protect, not compensate, just erase." It's chilling. The wizarding world often deals with its moral failures not by facing them, but by making others forget they happened. One of the darkest uses of memory manipulation comes not from heroes or government officials, but from the villains who understood its power all too well. In Half-Blood Prince, Hokey, the house elf of Hepzibah Smith, was convicted of poisoning her mistress, but as Dumbledore discovered through a memory, it was Tom Riddle who murdered Hepzibah and altered Hokey's memory so that even she believed herself guilty. Her memory had been tampered with, Dumbledore told Harry. It was a perfect crime, executed not through brute force, but through silent, surgical manipulation of truth. This incident underlines a key danger. Obliviate does not merely erase. In skilled hands, it rewrites. What seems like forgetfulness might in fact be a planted lie. The victim walks away not confused, but certain of a new reality that never occurred. In the Muggle world, such violations would be regarded as severe psychiatric abuse, potentially requiring lifelong therapy. In the wizarding world, they're standard practice. Even Hermione Granger, one of the most morally grounded characters in the series, used the spell in a profoundly heartbreaking way. Before setting out on the hunt for Horcruxes, she used Obliviate on her own parents, rewriting their memories so that they believed they were Wendell and Monica Wilkins, a couple without children, ready to move to Australia. Hermione's action was an act of love, but it was still a fundamental violation of her parents' minds. She chose for them to forget her, to forget everything they had shared. The trauma of such an act for both her and for them is never fully explored in the series, but it lingers like a bruise beneath the narrative. There's a sinister convenience to Obliviate that makes it one of the most ethically fraught spells in existence. It allows wizards to clean up their messes without accountability. Instead of offering justice or truth, they offer silence. Silence enforced by amnesia. It's a spell that can undo guilt, remove witnesses, and sanitize history. Imagine how easily it could be abused in politics, romance, or even education. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement, for reasons never satisfactorily explained in the books, does not strictly regulate the use of memory charms. There's no known registry of how often it's used, who casts it, or why. Given the spell's capacity for abuse, this is shocking. The trace, which monitors underage magic, is sensitive enough to detect a hover charm, but no one seems to monitor memory erasure. It's an oversight that borders on criminal negligence. When Bertha Jorkins disappeared in Goblet of Fire, her story offered another brutal insight into the power and peril of memory charms. Crouch Sr. had modified her memory to hide his son's escape from Azkaban. Voldemort later undid the charm, saying, "Her mind had been addled by a memory charm, powerful but not permanent." The process of restoring her memories was so painful that it broke her. Then he killed her. Her death is often overlooked, but it underscores how memory magic is not only a tool of erasure, it is also a weapon of torture. Memory in the magical world is not sacred. It is a fluid commodity, something that can be stored in vials, examined in pensives, or shattered by brute force. When Harry views Snape's memories in Deathly Hallows, the act is portrayed as revelatory. But it also raises disturbing questions. Can memories be edited before being extracted? Are they always reliable? What does it mean to see someone's past through their own curated lens? Even the pensive, often romanticized for its clarity, is subject to manipulation. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore chooses which memories to show Harry, carefully shaping the boy's understanding of Voldemort. Harry never questions whether Dumbledore omitted anything. There is no oversight, no assurance that what he sees is unfiltered truth. And why should there be? In a society where memory is magic, truth becomes a matter of curation. The spell Obliviate thus stands as more than just a magical utility. It is an ideological tool, a mechanism for control. It permits those with power to decide what others remember, and by extension, who they are. Because memory defines identity, To forget your child, your spouse, your trauma, your joy, these are not benign omissions. These are fractures in the soul. The story of Morphin Gaunt, uncle to Voldemort, illustrates the catastrophic effects of memory manipulation. After Tom Riddle murdered the Riddle family, he stunned Morphin and altered his memory to believe he had committed the murders. Morphin confessed, was convicted, and died in Azkaban. An innocent man's life was destroyed not by the act of murder, but by the erasure of truth. Memory, once again, was not a record, but a weapon. In a society so reliant on magic, the erosion of ethical boundaries becomes dangerous. Wizards can fix broken bones, regrow teeth, and travel through time, but they have yet to establish a system of accountability for Obliviate. Why does the Ministry not require formal reporting for memory modification? Why are witches and wizards not taught the psychological risks of tampering with minds? The answer may lie in the cultural normalization of such spells. When magic makes the impossible simple, morality often becomes optional. It's telling that during the entire series, not one witch or wizard openly questions the morality of memory charms. They question unforgivable curses, they fear dementors, they debate the use of polyjuice potion, but Obliviate? It's treated as mundane, like a cleaning spell. This absence of ethical discourse reveals a deep blindness in magical society, a refusal to confront the darker implications of their power. What would a magical world look like if every memory charm had to be registered, investigated, and justified? Would Lockhart have risen to fame? Would Morphin Gaunt have died in prison? Would Bertha Jorkins still be alive? The absence of oversight has left a trail of shattered minds and rewritten fates. In many ways, Obliviate is the most dangerous spell in the wizarding world, not because it kills, but because it convinces everyone that nothing ever happened. The act of forgetting, when forced, is an act of violence. It tears at the roots of personhood. The wizarding world may cloak Obliviate in bureaucratic terms and harmless intent, but behind every use is a person who will never again be whole. That is the true cost of magical convenience. Number 21. Mental health in the wizarding world. In a world where young witches and wizards learn to duel before they can vote, and children regularly face creatures that feed on despair, it is striking how absent any mention of psychological care is in the wizarding world. The magical society, despite all its marvels, shows a glaring gap in its approach to mental health. This absence is not merely theoretical, it plays out in the lives of characters we follow closely, and the consequences echo louder than any spell. Harry Potter witnessed the death of Cedric Diggory in the graveyard of Little Hangleton. The flash of green light, the body falling, the helplessness that followed. And yet when he returned to Hogwarts, there was no counselor waiting, no healer trained in trauma, only disbelief, isolation, and eventually ridicule. As the Ministry denied Voldemort's return, Harry was left to process the trauma alone, at best with a brief conversation from Dumbledore, an authority figure who, by his own admission, chose to avoid him. "I have not been as open with you as I should have been," Dumbledore says later, a statement that underscores not only his secrecy, but the lack of emotional support around Harry. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries is one of the most advanced institutions in the wizarding world, capable of curing dangerous curses and repairing magical damage. Yet there is no known ward or healer for psychological trauma. When the Longbottoms are tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange, they are placed in the permanent spell damage ward, treated as irreparably broken. But even then, there's no hint that healers attempt to restore their minds through therapy, magical or otherwise. They are simply left. The wizarding curriculum at Hogwarts includes defense against the dark arts, but offers no preparation for dealing with the aftermath of witnessing or experiencing violence. Children as young as 11 are expected to brew potions that could cause paralysis or confusion and face off against boggarts and banshees. Yet there is no structured support for the fear, anxiety, or confusion that might follow. After Harry encounters a Dementor in his 3rd year, an encounter that forces him to relive his parents' murder, he receives a brief lesson in the Patronus charm from Lupin, but no guidance in processing what the memory means or how to cope with the resurgence of such pain. This void becomes especially cruel in the context of the Triwizard Tournament. The tasks are clearly dangerous and the participants are under constant stress. Cedric dies during the final task. Fleur is attacked by Grindylows. Harry nearly drowns. Victor Crumb is bewitched, but there's no follow-up, no mention of trauma counseling, debriefing, or even emotional support for the grieving Hufflepuff house. Cedric's death is met with silence from the institution that allowed him to compete. Dumbledore gives a speech. The Ministry denies everything. Then the students are sent home for the summer. The burden of emotional survival falls entirely on the individual, or worse, their friends. After Sirius Black dies in the Department of Mysteries, Harry spirals. He trashes Dumbledore's office, screams in rage, and withdraws into himself. There's no one trained to reach him, and the only person who tries, Dumbledore, waits until the damage has been done. "You are not the only one who has suffered," Dumbledore tells him. But such words ring hollow in the absence of concrete support. Even adults are not exempt from this negligence. Aurors, who face some of the most dangerous assignments in the magical world, receive physical training, but there is no indication they are prepared for the emotional toll of the job. Nymphadora Tonks, after losing Sirius, becomes withdrawn and depressed. Her Patronus changes form, a sign of deep emotional shift, and yet the explanation from the Order is vague at best. She is treated with vague concern rather than structured care. Her mental health is seen as a distraction from her duties, not as something to be addressed. The closest example of a magical being offering any kind of emotional support might be Madame Pomfrey, who occasionally soothes frightened students. But she is primarily a physical healer. Her interactions are short, pragmatic, and concerned with immediate bodily harm. When Hermione is petrified in her second year, she lies in the hospital wing for months, unconscious. There is no suggestion that upon awakening she would receive help coping with the trauma of being paralyzed for so long. Nor do we see anyone addressing the lasting fear she may feel after being hunted by a basilisk. Ron, who watches his pet rat transform into a murderer, loses his brother in battle and constantly faces danger, never discusses his fears with anyone professionally trained. He is expected, like so many others, to tough it out. When Fred dies, we are told the Weasley family mourns, but again, without the presence of healers or counselors. They are left to comfort one another, even as their world crumbles. The magical world seems to equate resilience with silence. Neville Longbottom, perhaps more than most, embodies this absence of psychological care. He grows up visiting his tortured parents in St. Mungo's, a child faced with irreversible tragedy. His early years at Hogwarts are marked by insecurity, fear, and ridicule. Snape targets him repeatedly, exploiting his fears, especially the boggart that turns into his least favorite teacher. A child afraid of his professor is not seen as a cause for intervention, but a joke. No one steps in. Neville's growth into a brave and loyal leader is remarkable, but it is not because of any institutional support. It is in spite of its absence. Perhaps the most haunting example of ignored trauma is Ariana Dumbledore. Her magical abilities become unstable after being attacked by Muggle boys. Her father is imprisoned, her mother hides her. She is kept at home, away from the world, her powers suppressed. Eventually she is killed during a duel between Albus, Grindelwald, and Aberforth. This family tragedy is never examined in the context of psychological injury. It is framed as a private shame. Her instability is seen not as a call for care but as something to hide. The Order of the Phoenix, a group that repeatedly risks their lives, also lacks any system of mental support. Members like Kingsley Shacklebolt, Remus Lupin, and Molly Weasley face death, betrayal, and the constant threat of violence. Molly is shown conjuring a boggart that manifests as the corpses of her family, an unmistakable sign of trauma. She breaks down sobbing. "I see them all dead," she cries. Yet no one calls a healer. No one suggests rest. It's seen as an unfortunate episode, not a cry for help. The educational system at Hogwarts also reflects this negligence. Despite being one of the most prestigious schools in the magical world, it provides no mental health resources. There is no school counselor, no grief support group, no structured way to process the intense experiences students endure. When Lavender Brown is injured in the Battle of Hogwarts and Seamus loses close friends, there's no space for them to talk. Their emotional wounds are invisible and therefore ignored. The house system at Hogwarts, while fostering camaraderie, also exacerbates divisions and isolation. Slytherins are ostracized, Hufflepuffs are mocked, and yet there is no adult present to help students navigate these divisions. Snape, tasked with protecting children, instead bullies them. His cruelty is seen as part of his complex character, not as a failure of the institution to protect its students. In a real-world setting, such behavior would warrant investigation. In Hogwarts, it is accepted the absence of psychological care also affects how justice is served. The Dementors of Azkaban feed on hope and happiness, essentially torture by despair. They are used by the Ministry as guards and at times even in schools. When they attack Harry on the train, no one at the Ministry issues an apology or explanation. Their use reveals a fundamental disregard for mental well-being. The system is more concerned with control than with rehabilitation or care. Even magical creatures, sentient and emotional, suffer under this neglect. House elves, like Creature, carry deep emotional wounds. He is traumatized by the death of Regulus, consumed by grief and resentment. It takes Harry's kindness, untrained, instinctual, to begin healing that damage. But again, this is not systemic. It is accidental and it leaves countless others without recourse. In the final battle, Hogwarts becomes a war zone. Students die, friends fall, families are torn apart. But the aftermath is never shown in emotional terms. Who comforts the survivors? Who helps the children whose classmates died in their arms? There is no mention of follow-up. The Great Hall is used for mourning, but no effort is made to heal the psychological damage. The war ends, life moves on, but the silence lingers. We expect more from a society so rich in magic. A world where memories can be bottled and relived, where minds can be entered through legilimency, and pain can be soothed with a touch of a wand. And yet they have not devised a single known method for treating trauma, grief, or fear. The tools exist, the will does not. This omission is not simply a plot hole, it is a reflection of cultural values within the wizarding world. Emotional pain is hidden, strength is measured in silence, those who break are locked away or forgotten, and the damage is passed on from generation to generation. The world of Harry Potter is magical, yes, but it is also deeply wounded. Had there been someone, anyone, trained to speak to Harry after Cedric's death, after Sirius's fall, after Dumbledore's funeral, perhaps his burden would have been lighter. Perhaps Ginny or Neville or Luna would have had a space to speak rather than cope in silence. Perhaps the next generation would not carry the same shadows, but the silence remained. And so in this world of spells and secrets, the mind remains the final frontier, not because it is beyond magic, but because it is beyond tradition. And in that, the greatest tragedy of all is not the magic that failed, but the care that never came. Number 22. Wand licensing and weapon control. In the magical world, a wand is not a toy, not a mere learning device, not a symbol of a student's education. It is a weapon, potent, lethal, unregulated, a slender piece of wood humming with ancient power, ready to unleash destruction or healing at the flick of a wrist. And yet, within the borders of the wizarding world, there exists no registry, no formal licensing body, no psychological evaluation, no safety protocol. At 11 years old, children are given unrestricted access to this weapon. In Ollivanders, the oldest wand shop in Britain, a child walks in with a parent or guardian and walks out an hour later with the most dangerous item they will ever own. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Ollivander famously said, but the implications of that simple phrase echo darkly throughout the magical community. A wand chooses, yes, but no one asks what the wizard will choose to do with it. There are no classes on restraint, no licenses issued, no background checks. 11 years old and already capable of casting the Cruciatus curse, if only they knew the incantation and meant it enough. The killing curse, Avada Kedavra, is considered unforgivable, yet it can be performed by any witch or wizard without any special permission or license. The curse is illegal, yes, but the tool needed to cast it is freely distributed to children. There is a certain madness in that. In the Muggle world, even a kitchen knife is considered dangerous in a school. A wand, which can end a life in an instant, is simply carried in a pocket. Even the Ministry of Magic, the governing body of Wizarding Britain, maintains no strict system for wand registration. The only charm used to monitor underage magic is the trace, a faint magical signature that alerts authorities if underage magic is used, but the trace doesn't attach to the wand, it attaches to the underage witch or wizard. Once they turn 17, the monitoring vanishes. A 17-year-old wizard can perform any spell anywhere, and there are no magical fingerprints left behind. Consider the case of Tom Riddle. At the age of 11, he received a wand from Ollivanders. His background was not questioned, his mental health not evaluated, despite Dumbledore's grave concerns. By 16, he had already split his soul and committed murder. The wand had served him loyally. No red flags were raised, no authorities interfered. The system, such as it is, allowed him to become Lord Voldemort, armed, dangerous, and completely unchecked. It was Dumbledore who later remarked, "Perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it." And yet the wizarding world gives every child power, whether they are suited to it or not. No one asked if Bellatrix Lestrange was suited to power. No one examined the wand that would one day torture auras into insanity. No one asked about Barty Crouch Jr. or his loyalties when he took up a wand in his school years. The system is built on trust, tradition, and silence. Wands are deeply personal. They bond with their owners, respond to their intentions, reflect their character. But they also obey unquestioningly when wielded with force. Draco Malfoy, barely 16, cast the Cruciatus Curse on Harry during the final year. At Hogwarts, there were no consequences. In the Room of Requirement, he disarmed Dumbledore. His wand did not resist. Later, Harry would disarm Draco, and the wand's loyalty would shift, without registration, without awareness from any legal body. In that moment, a child unknowingly became master of the Elder Wand. When Hermione Granger, at the age of 11, entered Hogwarts, she could already perform several basic spells. By the time she was 12, she brewed Polyjuice Potion, an incredibly advanced and dangerous bit of magic. She used her wand to impersonate another student, infiltrate private spaces, and obtain information that would have been illegal in any Muggle context. And yet she was praised, not punished. Ron Weasley, during his 5th year, accidentally cursed himself with a misfired spell during a duel with Draco Malfoy. The spell backfired, shooting jets of green light around the room. Had it been a killing curse, he might have died. But no one questioned why students were dueling in hallways, why they had unrestricted access to spells that could cause fatal harm. In a world where magic is law, discipline is a matter of personal ethics, not regulation. In the Deathly Hallows, wands changed hands like currency. Disarming was considered sufficient to transfer ownership. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stole wands from snatchers. Bellatrix's wand was taken. Malfoy's wand became Harry's. No legal consequences followed. The wand is treated as property, but it is much more than that. It is the key to a person's magical identity. Still, no one guards it. No government issues replacement protocols. No one tracks where stolen wands go. Sirius Black, an innocent man, spent 12 years in Azkaban. When he escaped, no wand registry flagged his presence. He did not have a wand when he fled, but when he retrieved one, nothing stopped him. A man suspected of murder, carrying a wand, moving undetected. And this is not an isolated flaw, it is a systemic blind spot in the magical legal structure. The tragedy of Cedric Diggory's death illustrates this vulnerability starkly. In the graveyard at Little Hangleton, Voldemort used his wand to kill Cedric without hesitation. The spell hit him instantly. No charm, no alarm, no surveillance magic noted it. There is no automatic reporting of the killing curse. If Harry had not returned with Cedric's body, no one would have known. The wand enabled death, and the magical world did not even blink. Even more concerning is how easily wands are carried in public. Wizards stroll through Diagon Alley with wands tucked in robes. At the Quidditch World Cup, thousands of wands were present. During the chaos caused by the Dark Mark, curses flew wildly. Ministry officials tried to regain control, but no wand was confiscated. No authority demanded that people relinquish their wands in a crisis. Auras, who are meant to protect Wizarding Society, undergo training, but even they carry wands indistinguishable from the average citizens. There is no magical equivalent of a badge or unique wand signature that authorizes force. Kingsley Shacklebolt could have been anyone in a crowd until he spoke. The wand, again, is unmarked by law. The power disparity this creates is vast. A skilled witch or wizard can enter a room and silence, immobilize, or kill without lifting a hand. A flick is enough. In the Muggle world, such potential would demand surveillance, biometric identification, locked containment. In the magical world, it is shrugged off as normal. Remus Lupin once said, "The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters." And yet the magical community behaves as if it is. They assume the good will remain good, the bad will be caught, and the rest, children mostly, will learn through trial and error. There is a dangerous optimism in that. It ignores how many young wizards are drawn to power without understanding its weight. Dolores Umbridge, as Undersecretary to the Minister of Magic, used her wand to carve words into a student's skin. She did not need permission. Her position gave her access, but her wand gave her power. The ministry turned a blind eye. Magic was used to harm, and it was called discipline. In the Department of Mysteries, teenage students clashed with Death Eaters in a full-scale magical battle. Spells flew, glass shattered, time was distorted. None of these teenagers held a license. Their wands were not checked at the door. The battle ended with the death of Sirius Black and nearly the deaths of several others. It was a war fought by children, armed and allowed to be. There are magical protections, of course, spells like the Fidelius Charm or the magical binding of an unbreakable vow, but these are voluntary. Magic has no structural enforcement body equivalent to a Muggle police force with weapon oversight. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement exists, but it is reactive. It acts after the curse has been cast, not before. The case of Gellert Grindelwald is particularly telling. He rose to power through charisma, ideology, and a wand. His crimes were vast. His use of the Elder Wand made him nearly invincible. But when Dumbledore finally faced him, it was wand against wand, not court against criminal, not law against chaos. Power answered with power, unchecked and wild. In the aftermath of the Second Wizarding War, there was no reform. No wand licensing law was passed. No magical safety act introduced. The assumption, as always, was that peace would prevail and that education would suffice. But education without regulation is not enough. Even Hogwarts, the most prestigious school of magic in Britain, does not teach wand ethics as a subject. The magical world, for all its wonder, lives on the edge of a blade. If that blade were alive, aware, and loyal to the hand that holds it. A wand is a sacred tool, yes, but it is also a gun without a trigger lock, distributed freely, carried proudly, and pointed at anyone the user wishes. It is both beauty and danger, and it is unlicensed still. Number 23, dueling and lack of official rules. It is a peculiar feature of the wizarding world that something as dangerous and volatile as magical dueling remains largely unregulated. Wands, capable of both healing and killing, are brandished in anger or pride with little fear of legal reprisal. Unlike the Muggle world, where even fistfights are constrained by law and consequence, magical battles take place in back alleys, classrooms, or public institutions, as if governed more by tradition and impulse than law. This strange absence of structure in such a perilous activity begs deeper exploration. Why does a society that has regulated portkey use, broomstick flight, and house elf labor seem so indifferent to the violent chaos of its own duels? Let us begin with a familiar scene. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter are pitted against each other in a dueling club organized by none other than Gilderoy Lockhart. The supposed goal, to train students in defense. What transpires instead is a chaotic display of uncontrolled magic. Harry is hit by a Serpensortius spell, and Draco conjures a live serpent to attack him. There is no shield of magical protocol, no supervisor prepared to intervene responsibly. Snape, the only one capable of taking control, merely watches as the situation escalates. No warning is issued. No disciplinary action follows. One might wonder, is this training or merely sanctioned recklessness? Contrast this with the duel that occurs far from any classroom in the shadows of the Department of Mysteries. Dumbledore and Voldemort clash in Order of the Phoenix, unleashing a scale of magic that shatters windows, cracks floors, and defies physics. There was a bang like a cannon blast, and the floor around Harry shuddered. The battle is a ballet of elemental fury, and yet no auras intervene. No magical tribunal is summoned. When the smoke clears and Voldemort vanishes, the Ministry does not press charges against Dumbledore, nor launch an inquiry. The damages are brushed under the enchanted rug. One can only imagine the bureaucracy if such an event occurred in the Muggle world. Here it ends with Cornelius Fudge merely muttering, "He's back." In the Triwizard Tournament, held under the supposed strictest supervision, Cedric Diggory and Harry duel briefly for the cup. It's telling that even then, amid rigid contracts and international oversight, dueling is treated like a reflexive tool. When both boys touch the portkey, they are transported to a graveyard where the ultimate lawlessness occurs. Voldemort returns and, in a horrifying display, kills Cedric and duels Harry with a wand that has killed hundreds. "And now we duel," Voldemort whispers. And the gathered Death Eaters step back with reverence. The Ministry's reaction? Denial, silence, cover-up. No one investigates how a minor duelled and survived the darkest wizard of the age. If we seek to understand this cultural indifference, we must look further back into the traditions that shape the wizarding world. Magical duels have long been a matter of honor. In the tales of Beedle the Bard, we hear of wizards settling disputes with wandwork rather than words. Duels are woven into wizarding lore as romantic, even noble, engagements. Yet there is a thin line between valor and violence. What was once a matter of pride has become, in modern times, an unchecked avenue for vengeance. The duel between Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald in 1945, widely considered the greatest of its kind, ended a global war. But even that climactic battle had no official framework. It was not monitored, recorded, or judged. History tells us who won. The law says nothing at all. At Hogwarts, students throw jinxes in hallways with impunity. Fred and George Weasley once turned a hallway into a swamp, enchanted fireworks to attack professors, and used spells far beyond the curriculum. "I could make that old toad cough up slugs," George once declared. Yet none of this results in legal action. Dolores Umbridge, for all her cruelty, tried in vain to apply some level of control, and failed, because the culture of magic itself resists containment. Even when dueling is prohibited in name, it thrives in spirit. When Harry uses Sectum Sempra on Draco Malfoy in Half-Blood Prince, the consequences are dire. Blood pours from slashed skin. The scene is grotesque. And yet this violent act is treated as a school discipline issue, not a criminal one. Snape heals Draco. Harry loses his privilege to wander the castle. There is no inquiry into the source of the spell nor any ministry involvement. This is a clear example of near-fatal magic used by an underage wizard on another student. Still, the broader world turns a blind eye. One is left to wonder, is there no magical equivalent of an assault charge? And what of the unforgivable curses? Harry uses the Cruciatus curse multiple times during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, and again during the war. In Deathly Hallows, he casts the Imperious Curse on Travers and a goblin to sneak into Gringotts. No trial follows, no aura demands explanation. The law, as established by Barty Crouch Sr., clearly states that the use of these curses warrants a life sentence in Azkaban. Yet the rule bends, reshapes, or vanishes entirely, depending on circumstance. Apparently, moral intent overrides magical law, Harry. But where is that distinction written? During the Battle of Hogwarts, hundreds of witches and wizards duel, many to the death. Spells like Avada Kedavra, Reducto, and Confringo are used indiscriminately. The Great Hall becomes a battlefield. No magical authority steps in to enforce ceasefire or detain spellcasters. War excuses all, it seems. Yet in the aftermath, who is held accountable? Were Death Eaters tried for their dueling deaths? Were students questioned about who they killed? The answer remains buried in silence. Even the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, the supposed legal arm of the ministry, seems uninterested in curbing the culture of dueling. The Aura Office focuses more on rogue wizards and artifact smuggling than on monitoring magical duels. The improper use of Magic Office sends letters for underage spells but says nothing about illegal duels. Bafalda Hopkirk informs Harry he's expelled for using magic near a Muggle. But when 2 adult wizards destroy half of London in a firefight, no such notice arrives. This reveals a disturbing priority: optics over safety. The lack of a formal dueling code leaves room for chaos. Who decides what is excessive force? Who determines when a duel turns into murder? Is the act of responding to a curse with a stronger one considered defense or escalation? In Muggle courts, such distinctions are critical. In the wizarding world, they are absent. One could argue that the pensieve, that ancient magical device used to revisit memory, should be a tool for justice. Yet it's rarely employed to assess duels. Truth is too fluid in a world governed by magic. In fact, the wizarding world seems to rely more on personal honor than on laws. Dumbledore trusts Snape's word. Fudge refuses to believe Harry. The truth is measured by personal belief, not evidence. This same subjectivity governs dueling. If a wizard claims self-defense, few question it. If a student is injured in a spell gone wrong, they are healed and hushed. The silence of the system is louder than the chaos of combat. Duels are also status markers. Consider Bellatrix Lestrange. Her ferocious style of dueling, filled with gleeful violence, is never censured by her peers. In Order of the Phoenix, she kills Sirius Black with a single spell and escapes into the night. No wanted poster follows, no formal investigation is described. The Order mourns. The Ministry covers up. Life moves on. Here, death is merely another plot point, not a crime to be answered for. Perhaps most telling is the complete absence of a dueling registry. Wizards acquire wands at 11, receive no formal combat training, and are then permitted to use deadly spells without oversight. A child in their 6th year at Hogwarts can cast a blasting curse as powerful as a stick of dynamite. And yet no licensing, no wand tracking, no magical insurance is required. This isn't just a gap in policy, it's a gaping wound in the magical justice system. Some might argue that the secrecy of the magical world necessitates this. That oversight would only draw Muggle attention, but this argument collapses under scrutiny. After all, duels are rarely discreet. In The Half-Blood Prince, Death Eaters attack the Millennium Bridge, causing Muggle panic. In Order of the Phoenix, the battle in the Ministry leaves the building in ruins. Secrecy does not excuse absence of accountability. If anything, it demands stricter discipline. Even schools other than Hogwarts fail to set a better example. Durmstrang, with its obsession for the dark arts, likely encourages dueling rather than restricting it. Beauxbaton, for all its elegance, is never shown to enforce laws against student spellcasting. There is no known international treaty governing magical combat. Wizards travel freely with their wands, ready to duel in any land as if the world were one endless battlefield. At the core, the absence of dueling laws reflects a larger truth, that wizarding society is built on tradition, not regulation. It prizes heritage, bloodlines, and talent over structure. Dueling is part of that tapestry, a leftover from an age when might made right, and the wand was the only law. In this, the magical world reveals its deepest flaw. It mistakes power for justice. And so, as long as duels continue to be romanticized in classrooms, dramatized in books, and ignored in courtrooms, the cycle will repeat. Another generation of children will learn Expelliarmus before they learn the consequences of using it. Another duel will erupt in a corridor, and another young wizard will bear scars, physical or magical, with no one to call it what it is: violence, masquerading as tradition, Number 24. Emotion and will-altering spells. In the world of magic, not all power manifests through fire, lightning, or explosions. Some of the most potent and insidious spells do not leave bruises or scars. They slide beneath the skin, curling around the mind like smoke, whispering to the heart, tugging at emotion, bending will. Emotional manipulation through magic is perhaps the darkest and most unregulated frontier of wizarding power, and one that the Ministry, Hogwarts, and even the wider magical society refuse to truly confront. The most notorious of these spells is of course, the Imperious Curse. Declared one of the unforgivable curses, it gives the caster total control over the victim's body and mind. Under its influence, a person may dance, sing, kill, or leap from a rooftop, all with a smile. When Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, demonstrated this curse to the fourth-year Defense Against the Dark Arts students, the room fell silent with horror. As the spider danced under his control, Neville Longbottom trembled, his fists clenched. The trauma of his parents, driven insane by another unforgivable curse, made this display unbearable. Yet even among unforgivable curses, the Imperious stands apart in its eerie intimacy. It does not simply cause pain, it erases choice. But while the Imperious Curse is banned, traceable and regulated, there are others, softer, subtler spells that are not. These spells do not possess the explosive cruelty of Cruciatus or the finality of Avada Kedavra. They do not leave a mark. Instead, they make people want to obey, to trust, to forgive, to forget. They shape the very core of a person's emotional reality, and they are disturbingly legal. Consider the love potion, technically not a spell but a concoction. It alters a person's emotional state so drastically that they become obsessed with another. The case of Merope Gaunt is perhaps the most tragic cautionary tale. Desperate and unloved, she used a love potion to seduce the Muggle Tom Riddle Sr. for months. He lived under her spell, wooed into fatherhood. The moment she stopped administering the potion, out of hope he had come to love her truly, he fled in revulsion. The child born of this manipulation would grow to be Lord Voldemort, a man incapable of love. Could the roots of his cruelty be traced back to the falsehood of his very conception? Yet the love potion is not banned. It is sold in joke shops. Lavender Brown giggled over bottles of it. Romilda Vane attempted to use it on Harry Potter. Its very existence is seen as comedic or mischievous despite its implications. What is the line between love and enslavement when emotion is brewed or spelled into being? Equally troubling are the so-called charming spells, literally and figuratively. The attraction charm, a variation often found in advanced transfiguration and used in theatre performances or romantic play, subtly adjusts the way a target perceives the caster. It may brighten the eyes, enhance the voice, soften the presence. A skilled user can increase their perceived charisma tenfold. Imagine the implications in courtrooms, in politics, in education. What defense does the human heart have when the senses themselves are being bewitched? Delilah Selwyn, a charismatic Slytherin prefect in the 1980s, was whispered to have enchanted half the staff at Hogwarts. Teachers gave her better grades, students followed her orders. Her reign was marked not by tyranny, but by persuasion, a subtle seduction of everyone's better judgment. No one could prove anything. There were no curses, no traces, no broken rules. But when she left, it was as though a fog lifted. Years later, one former professor admitted to the Daily Prophet, "It was like looking at the moon and thinking it was the sun. You couldn't even question it until she was gone." Even more disturbing is the calming charm, used routinely at St. Mungo's and taught in its simplest form to young witches and wizards. Designed to ease panic, calm anger, or lull someone into sleep, it seems harmless, but its misuse is terrifyingly easy. Molly Weasley once used it to quiet her husband after an argument, an act born of love but still a violation of his natural reaction. If a person is angry or distraught, is it moral to mute that emotion, however unpleasant it may be? The spell was once used in a disciplinary hearing at the Department of Magical Transportation when an employee broke down sobbing over the death of a friend in a flu network accident. Rather than comfort her, a supervisor used a calming charm to mute her tears and continue the meeting. The action was efficient. It was also, by every emotional and ethical standard, dehumanizing. Grief is not noise, it is truth. To spell it away is to silence the soul. In Hogwarts, there are no explicit rules forbidding the use of such spells among students. In the room of requirement, love potions were brewed with impunity. In the corridors, flirty spells passed for jokes. Yet the capacity for harm is immense. Emotional manipulation can be a kind of bullying more enduring than any jinx. In third year, a Ravenclaw student named Cassian Flint was caught using a subtle obedience charm, a gentle suggestion spell, on younger students to get their sweets, homework, and secrets. He was given detention, not expelled, not examined by the staff, no investigation followed. Even within the Order of the Phoenix, moral lines blurred. When Kingsley Shacklebolt needed information from a reluctant witness, he used what he called a mood-softening enchantment. He claimed it was harmless, but if such methods are used by those who claim to fight for good, how far is the difference from the enemy they resist? The case of Gilderoy Lockhart stands as a monument to emotional deceit. His entire career was built on memory charms which fall into this same category of manipulation. He erased the minds of real heroes and claimed their tales. He enchanted the public to adore him. When he tried to use Obliviate on Harry and Ron, it backfired, permanently damaging his own mind. It was poetic justice, but the damage to others had already been done. No law had stopped him. Fame had protected him. The truth is, the magical world relies on emotional manipulation more than it admits. The Ministry's own public information department uses soothing charms in broadcasted messages. Magical advertising routinely includes aura-enhancing spells. Even career counseling at Hogwarts has been suspected of subtle nudges, a way to push students towards stable paths. How many dreams were muted, reshaped not by guidance but by charm? The danger lies in normalization. When manipulation becomes commonplace, it ceases to be seen. The spell becomes part of the air, like background music or perfume. It comforts, it flatters, it directs. But it also removes agency. It makes puppets of people. And in doing so, it undermines the core value of magical society: freedom. Remus Lupin once remarked, "It is the choices we make that show what we truly are." But if our emotions, those engines of choice, are influenced by others' spells, are we truly making our own decisions? In the Second Wizarding War, Death Eaters were known to use subtle emotional spells to undermine trust in communities. A mother turned against her son. A healer failed to assist her patient. Each story was isolated, whispered, but beneath them all was a thread of suggestion magic, barely detectable, nearly impossible to prove. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement has no dedicated division to track these manipulations. Auras are trained to spot curses and hexes, but not emotional spells. There is no equivalent to a Muggle lie detector. There are no standard protocols for emotional influence in courtrooms. This silence, this lack of regulation, is a failure of imagination and morality. Albus Dumbledore, perhaps the greatest wizard of his age, was not innocent either. His skill in Legilimency, his ability to read emotions and sometimes implant thoughts, was legendary. Though he never misused it publicly, the fact remains: power allows temptation. Even the best of men must be watched. And if Dumbledore could look into hearts, what was to stop others? When Harry faced Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, he felt the weight of choice. He chose to die to save others. That moment, raw and unmanipulated, was pure heroism. Imagine if someone had enchanted him to be braver. Would it still count? Would it still be his courage? The magical world must confront its hypocrisy. It cannot outlaw the imperious curse and yet laugh at love potions. It cannot claim to value freedom and yet tolerate charms that bend emotion. Emotional autonomy is not a luxury. It is the essence of humanity, even magical humanity. It is time for a registry, for regulation, for education. Students must learn not just how to cast such spells, but when not to. There must be ethical courses at Hogwarts, consequences for misuse, and open conversations. The power to influence minds is greater than the power to break bones. For now, the magical world shrugs, it winks, it brews, it charms, and the heart, the last sanctuary of personal truth, remains unguarded in a world where you can be made to love, obey, calm down, or forget. Where does free will truly begin? Number 25. Muggle interference. In the vast corridors of the Ministry of Magic, behind polished doors and endless paperwork, lies one of the most controversial and overlooked departments, the Office for the Detection and Confiscation of Counterfeit Defensive Spells and Protective Objects. A lesser-known subsection claims to monitor magical interference in the Muggle world, but as reports stack up, one begins to wonder, is anyone truly watching? The Ministry declares its mission is to safeguard Muggles from magical influence, yet the evidence suggests a chaotic tapestry of unchecked meddling, magical negligence, and outright abuse. Consider the curious case of Arthur Weasley. A lovable figure to many, his fascination with Muggle technology often translated into reckless experimentation. Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain, Arthur once warned Ginny. Yet he himself disenchanted toasters and bewitched telephones with alarming frequency. In Chamber of Secrets, he is fined 5 galleons for enchanting a flying car. The same car later spiraled out of control over the skies of London, risking exposure of the entire magical community and endangering Muggle lives. Ron Weasley and Harry Potter crashing into the Whomping Willow was seen as a mere schoolboy stunt, but no one stopped to ask how many Muggles witnessed that streaking, enchanted Ford Anglia. Arthur's case is but a whimsical mask for a more sinister reality. Not all magical interference is innocent or fueled by curiosity. There are reports, quiet, buried in ministry drawers, of Muggles permanently transformed, driven insane, or quietly disappeared. In 1996, a Muggle woman in Norfolk was turned into a badger and left to wander her garden for weeks. Local authorities wrote it off as hysteria. The Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes eventually intervened, but the woman's memory was erased, her house was sold off, and she was relocated, clueless, to a new life she never asked for. Instances like these are not rare, they are simply undocumented. Memory charms have become the preferred broom under which the magical world sweeps its mistakes. Obliviate is used with disturbing casualness. Gilderoy Lockhart was known for his flamboyant abuse of the spell, but the practice goes far beyond his fraudulent career. After the Quidditch World Cup in Goblet of Fire, a whole Muggle campsite had to be obliviated after Death Eaters rampaged through the night sky. The Ministry deployed a small battalion of obliviators to erase memories en masse, never once considering the ethical ramifications of removing hours of someone's life against their will. The supposed control mechanisms for these actions are shrouded in bureaucracy. The improper use of Magic Office is designed to catch magical lawbreakers, yet most of its focus lies in underage magic, not in the monitoring of adult witches and wizards who take liberties with Muggles. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement is too often caught in the chase for dark wizards to monitor routine misconduct. And what of the Wizengamot? A body meant to enforce justice, yet so rarely convened for cases involving Muggle abuse that one might believe such matters are beneath them. The lack of transparency is alarming. Who tracks the daily use of memory charms? Who verifies that spells cast on Muggle property are reversed properly? In truth, no agency in the magical world publishes statistics on magical interference. There are no public audits, no citizen inquiries. It is a system built on silence and trust, a dangerous combination, especially when dealing with a population that neither sees nor understands its oppressors. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry is put on trial for defending himself and his cousin against a Dementor, we witness a rare moment of over-enforcement. Cornelius Fudge's ministry attempted to expel Harry without a proper investigation. Laws can be bent, says Dumbledore coolly, when it suits those in power. The irony is thick. While Harry is nearly imprisoned for a defensive spell, countless adults commit far more reckless magic against Muggles without consequence. Where is the balance? Who draws the line between justice and convenience? The abuse isn't always criminal, sometimes it's born of arrogance. Magical folk raised in insular communities are often taught to view Muggles as quaint, even inferior. The term Muggle itself, though commonplace, carries an undertone of separation. When Marge Dursley ballooned into the ceiling in Prisoner of Azkaban, it was easy to dismiss her as cruel and deserving. But no disciplinary action followed for Harry. No check was made on the long-term psychological trauma inflicted on her. The magical world simply waved it off. She was a Muggle. She would forget. Sirius Black, upon breaking out of Azkaban, caused a nationwide manhunt. The Ministry dispatched alerts to both magical and Muggle news agencies, but rather than inform Muggles of the danger, they clouded the truth. "We've had reports of sightings," said Arthur Weasley, "but we're not telling the Muggles why." The implication? Muggles are too simple to grasp the complexity of wizard crimes, or worse, not worth protecting, through honest communication. Another unsettling example comes from Half-Blood Prince, where the Death Eaters kidnap and murder Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. In the same year, several Muggle families go missing. The Ministry never issues warnings. No magical community mobilizes to protect Muggles. Only the Order of the Phoenix seems to recognize the threat spilling over the magical boundary. The official silence is deafening. As long as the wizarding world remains hidden, it seems, Muggle lives are expendable. There's also the matter of magical creatures unleashed upon the Muggle world. Dragons, hippogriffs, and even basilisks have threatened Muggle lives across centuries. Hagrid's history with dangerous beasts, while endearing to fans, is a bureaucratic nightmare. Who granted him permission to house a three-headed dog inside a school? What if Fluffy had escaped into the Muggle Highlands? And when Aragog's children swarm the Forbidden Forest, who ensures they stay out of nearby towns? No one. The assumption is always that magic will clean up its own mess. Even the educational system is at fault. Hogwarts teaches students how to transfigure animals into water goblets, but spends no time discussing the ethical use of magic in the presence of non-magical people. Dumbledore, for all his wisdom, never establishes clear conduct codes for students interacting with the Muggle world. And the Ministry certainly doesn't sponsor educational campaigns. There is no equivalent of "don't drink and drive" for "don't stun and obliviate." Wizards like Xenophilius Lovegood, while eccentric, make a troubling case for unregulated magical behavior. He openly publishes conspiracies about magical events and personalities, often referencing events that implicate the Muggle world. While the Quibbler is mostly dismissed, its unfiltered information is sometimes more accurate than the Daily Prophet, exposing the instability of the magical media. What if such truths fell into Muggle hands? It is essential to mention the Statute of Secrecy. Signed in 1692, it was intended to protect the wizarding world from persecution, but over the centuries, it has evolved into a shroud of impunity. The clause that no magical being shall reveal their nature to Muggles is treated not as a guideline for safety, but as a cloak under which misdeeds hide. Secrecy becomes a weapon, not a shield. Even in times of peace, the wizarding world often interacts with Muggles in manipulative ways. Consider the night bus. It barrels invisibly through Muggle traffic, bouncing off lampposts, darting through red lights. What happens when a Muggle car swerves to avoid an unseen object? Who takes responsibility for those wrecks? The Ministry? Or is it simply erased along with the memories of every confused driver? Tom Riddle's manipulation of Muggles during his time at the orphanage also raises questions. Though he was a child, his actions included harming fellow orphans and stealing. Dumbledore acknowledges his strange behavior, but lets it slide, claiming that the school would help him grow. It didn't. Became the most dangerous wizard in history. Perhaps early intervention, including better understanding of the Muggle world, could have prevented that. Even more disturbing is the manner in which the magical community sometimes uses Muggles as pawns. In Deathly Hallows, Muggleborns are rounded up, interrogated, and accused of stealing magic. The Ministry, overtaken by Voldemort, no longer pretends to protect Muggles, it hunts them, and no organized magical resistance prioritizes their safety. The battle for Hogwarts, epic and tragic as it was, never once addressed the collateral damage inflicted on the Muggle towns nearby. There is no magical version of the Human Rights Commission, no watchdog groups, no legal aid for Muggle families affected by magical interference. Imagine losing your child to an enchanted object, or waking up in a different country with no memory and having no legal recourse. These people disappear into a fog of magic, their stories erased, their traumas dismissed. The truth is hard to swallow. The magical world, for all its charm and wonder, has failed to create systems of accountability. It hides behind spells and secrecy, excusing cruelty as caution and negligence as necessity. But how long can this illusion be sustained? How many more Muggles must be experimented on, erased, or silenced before the Ministry takes a long, hard look at its conscience? It may be time for the magical community to lift its veil, not entirely, but just enough to let truth and justice breathe. If the wizarding world cannot govern itself with fairness, then perhaps it no longer deserves to govern alone. In the words of Hermione Granger, just because you have the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have. The Muggle world deserves more than silence. It deserves respect. Number 26. Storage and destruction of dangerous artifacts. In the shadowy corners of the wizarding world, artifacts of immense danger and corrupted power lie scattered like ticking time bombs. Tom Riddle's diary, deceptively innocuous, looked no different than a well-kept student journal, yet within its pages pulsed the echo of a soul long lost to darkness. The medallion of Salazar Slytherin, heavy with ancient pride and venomous enchantments, passed from one unknowing hand to another. Again and again, these deadly objects were not hidden behind steel doors or warded in ministry vaults, but discovered in attics, old cabinets, and even the pocket of an unsuspecting house elf. How is it that a society brimming with magic has failed so spectacularly at the most basic task of all, safeguarding itself from itself? Consider the diary, Riddle's first Horcrux. Created at the peak of youthful arrogance, it was entrusted to Lucius Malfoy, a man whose devotion to Voldemort was matched only by his thirst for political power. Lucius kept it hidden in the depths of his manor, not in a secure ministry facility, but among other heirlooms, and later slipped it into the possession of a schoolgirl to discredit Arthur Weasley. No magical tracking, no official registry. A piece of a Dark Lord's soul sat in a teenager's satchel. The diary, my diary, little Ginny's been writing in it for months and months, Harry recalls in The Chamber of Secrets. And yet no alarm bells rang in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. There was no system to notice the sudden presence of dark magic in Hogwarts, a school with 1,000 years of legacy. The Ministry of Magic, for all its departments and offices, possesses no known division solely devoted to the cataloguing, studying, or permanent disposal of malevolent magical objects. The Department of Mysteries deals with the enigmas of time, death, and space, but not with the cursed tiaras of fallen witches. The Aura Office hunts dark wizards, but does not seem to oversee the aftermath of their magical byproducts. So when such artifacts are discovered, if they are discovered, they are left to the instincts and judgments of individuals rather than handled by a standardized protocol. Sirius Black's house, number 12, Grimmauld Place, serves as an unintentional museum of such neglected items. Beneath its mouldy wallpaper and behind locked cupboards, one could find a music box that induced a deep, unnatural sleep, and a portrait that refused to be silenced. But most disturbing of all was the locket, Slytherin's locket, which not even Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of his age, managed to retrieve before it was lost to the tides of disorder. Only Creature, the house elf, overlooked by all, remembered the locket. This artifact, had it been secured properly by any authority, could have been neutralized years before it ever wrapped its darkness around Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The destruction of such items is just as haphazard as their storage. Horcruxes require a very specific method to destroy, something that damages beyond magical repair. Basilisk venom, for instance, is one of the few substances capable of such permanent destruction, but the information about this is not readily accessible. It is neither taught at Hogwarts nor preserved in any known magical repository. The wizarding world treats this knowledge like ancient folklore rather than survival-critical intelligence. Hermione Granger, with her unmatched academic prowess, found a clue in Secrets of the Darkest Art, a book banned and buried in the restricted section. Why isn't such information available to trained aurors or those fighting dark magic? Albus Dumbledore, who had spent decades tracking and understanding Voldemort's Horcruxes, chose to confide his findings not to the Ministry nor to a secured archive, but to Harry alone. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore explains, "I have found and destroyed a Horcrux, and I believe I have found another." These were the words not of a system working as one, but of a lone man trying to extinguish a wildfire with his bare hands. And when he died, the burden of destroying the fragments of a Dark Lord's soul fell upon teenagers with no institutional support, magical resources, or official guidance. Contrast this with the rigorous protections placed upon Gringotts' wizarding bank. Dragons guard vaults, goblins count coins with fanatical devotion, and yet the Ministry never attempted to mirror such protections for cursed artifacts. The cup of Helga Hufflepuff, another Horcrux, remained hidden in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, surrounded by duplication curses and burning spells. But that wasn't to protect the world, it was to protect the artifact from thieves. The safety of the public was never a consideration. No magical signature traced the item, no alarms were triggered. Even when the Ministry fell under Death Eater control, the artifacts were not tracked because they never were in the first place. Dangerous items are frequently stumbled upon, not secured. The cursed opal necklace that nearly killed Katie Bell in The Half-Blood Prince was being sold at Borgin and Burke's, a shop infamous for trading in the dark and forbidden. The store remains in operation before, during, and after Voldemort's rise. No Ministry task force ever shut it down. One might imagine a world where each dangerous object is tagged with magical identifiers like a sort of enchanted signature or curse trace, easily detectable by trained personnel. Yet no such system exists. Wizards detect magical auras, but only if they're actively looking, and most aren't. The Mirror of Erised, though not malevolent, is another example of an object with dangerous potential left unguarded. "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live," Dumbledore once said, yet left the mirror in an abandoned classroom unmonitored until it became the hiding place for the Philosopher's Stone. Again, individual wisdom had to substitute for collective security. When the stone itself was finally destroyed, it was not because of any governmental order or policy, but at the will of its creator, Nicolas Flamel. The handling of the Resurrection Stone, embedded in the ring of Marvolo Gaunt, speaks volumes about the negligence surrounding artifact control. The ring sat in the ruins of a forgotten shack, waiting to be found. It was both a Horcrux and a Deathly Hallow, two of the most legendary and feared forms of magic in history, and no one but Dumbledore ever went looking for it. When he finally destroyed the Horcrux, he was cursed so badly it doomed him. Had that ring been catalogued, studied, and its location marked decades earlier, such a fate could have been avoided. One must ask, where are the magical equivalents of security vaults, quarantine zones, or arcane libraries with restricted access? Hogwarts has a restricted section, but its books are not actively monitored. Students can access them with a simple note from a professor. When Hermione retrieved Secrets of the Darkest Art, She did so easily, with no ministry approval required. For a world so dependent on the containment of magic, the infrastructure for such containment is dangerously inadequate. Even after the Battle of Hogwarts, when Voldemort's artifacts were destroyed, there is no indication that the wizarding world changed its policies. The ministry underwent a political cleansing, but not a procedural overhaul. Cursed items likely remain where they have always been, scattered, buried, forgotten, or worse, still in use by those unaware of their danger. Xenophilius Lovegood displayed the symbol of the Deathly Hallows in his home, not knowing the full extent of its meaning. This shows that even wizarding families with deep roots can misidentify or misunderstand powerful magical relics. The Sword of Gryffindor, though a weapon for good, was itself an unregulated artifact. It appeared and disappeared on its own terms. When it was needed most, it chose its bearer. But until then, the ministry kept a counterfeit sword in its display case. The real one had a mind of its own, yet no effort was made to track its location, secure it, or protect it from misuse. It was, at best, a benevolent rogue, useful but unpredictable. Then there is the issue of possession. Why were such objects ever allowed to remain in private hands? The Lestranges, Malfoys, Blacks, all pureblood families with ties to the dark arts, retained control over items of immense danger. The ministry showed no interest in searching or seizing these properties until the Second Wizarding War forced their hand. Even after Sirius Black was imprisoned, his family's home remained untouched by ministry hands until the Order of the Phoenix claimed it. Had the ministry intervened earlier, they might have found the Horcrux locket, the portrait of Walburga, or even the magical pests that infested the home. Magic itself is not the problem. It is the wizards who wield it without accountability. The very existence of a spell like Horcruxes, which allows one to fracture a soul and attain immortality, should have prompted immediate legislative action. The fact that such a spell was only vaguely known, hidden in a dusty book and passed by rumor, shows how little regard is given to magical regulation. There are departments for Muggle-worthy excuses and misuse of Muggle artifacts, but none devoted to the auditing of known dark magic, and so the wizarding world remains a landscape where power hides under floorboards, curses hum inside cabinets, and ancient magic waits for a curious child to awaken it. There is no vault in the ministry for the containment of evil. No enchanted grid spans the British Isles, scanning for dark pulses. No school curriculum trains students to identify and report suspicious magical objects. The entire system operates on reactive instinct rather than proactive intelligence. As if the greatest threat must explode before anyone dares to acknowledge its presence. One might imagine a world where every magical item, upon creation, is registered, where magical signatures are catalogued like fingerprints, where a new wand or enchanted artifact pings a central registry, where the Department of Mysteries collaborates with curse breakers, unspeakables, and magical historians to intercept, neutralize, and destroy dark objects the moment they appear. But in truth, the world of wizards clings to the old ways: secrecy, inheritance, and the dangerous illusion of control. Wizards much prefer to pretend that dark things do not exist, Dumbledore once implied, never stating it outright, but showing it in every decision he made. The lack of institutional vigilance speaks louder than any decree. When the darkest artifacts of their age were finally destroyed, it was not by laws or ministry action, it was by a boy, a girl, and a friend with a sword, a fang, and sheer courage. That may be the greatest magic of all, but it is no substitute for a world that learns from its own near destruction. Number 27. Privacy violations through magical means. In a world where spells can unlock doors, charms can unveil secrets, and enchanted objects can outwit even the cleverest minds, the notion of privacy becomes a fragile illusion. The wizarding world, for all its wonders, remains woefully unequipped to handle one of the most pressing ethical dilemmas of our time, the violation of confidentiality through magical means. Take, for instance, the Marauder's Map, an innocent-looking parchment capable of revealing the precise location of every person within the grounds of Hogwarts, complete with footsteps and labels of identity. Created by 4 mischievous students, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. It was originally a tool for evading authority, but in the wrong hands the map becomes far more sinister. It offers unrestricted surveillance with no consent or warning. No locked door can hide a person from it. No magical disguise is safe. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," it proclaims, but what if the person wielding it is not simply up to mischief, but to destruction? The implications are profound. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr., masquerading as Mad-Eye Moody, successfully manipulates events within the school, fooling everyone around him. If someone had used the Marauder's map, they might have seen two Mad Eyes, a clear signal of impersonation. Yet no such check existed. The map, when finally used by Harry, served only as a tool for curiosity, not protection. The wizarding world has no official structure for handling magical surveillance. There is no law that governs the use of such an object, no protocol to prevent abuse. And then there is the two-way mirror, gifted by Sirius Black to Harry, another seemingly benign artifact that enables visual and auditory communication across great distances. Though its purpose is noble, its mechanics are not unlike those of a Muggle wiretap. Anyone with access to one end of the mirror can observe the other. There is no encryption, no blocking charm, no consent. "Use it if you need me, all right?" Sirius says in Order of the Phoenix, unaware of how easily such a tool could be used against him. Had Dolores Umbridge intercepted that mirror, she could have accessed a direct channel into Sirius Black's private quarters. We cannot discuss magical invasions of privacy without acknowledging Rita Skeeter, the unscrupulous journalist whose quick, quotes, quill distorted interviews and whose Animagus form, a beetle, allowed her to infiltrate secret conversations undetected. She eavesdropped on Hermione Granger, Harry Potter, and others during their most vulnerable moments. "She's not supposed to be able to do it," Hermione says in Goblet of Fire, horrified at the betrayal. The fact that Rita never registered as an Animagus makes her actions not only unethical but illegal, yet her punishment was social shaming at best. No legal consequences followed. The real danger lies in how the wizarding world fails to distinguish between harmless fun and a violation of rights. In the Muggle world, devices that track movements, record conversations, or intercept messages are regulated. There are laws, stringent ones, that protect private lives. But in magical society, such boundaries do not exist. Anyone with a magical artifact or sufficient skill can spy, stalk, or intrude. It is not considered an offense unless the act leads to public scandal. This ambiguity allows for quiet, invisible crimes. Consider the Pensieve, Dumbledore's favorite repository for thoughts. A remarkable invention. It allows one to revisit memories with perfect clarity, even entering them as if they were a scene in a play. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry plunges into memories that Dumbledore collects, not all of them willingly given. One taken from the Slughorn is altered to hide uncomfortable truths. The existence of the Pensieve raises uncomfortable questions. Can someone forcibly extract your memory? Can it be tampered with? Can it be displayed without your permission? Indeed, in Deathly Hallows, Snape transfers memories to Harry moments before his death, again, without consent from the people depicted within. We see Dumbledore, Lily, and others in intimate, private moments. Their words, expressions, and even grief are laid bare. The emotional impact is immense, but so is the breach of their privacy. There is no ethical debate about this in the story. The information is simply taken and used. Is it justified by the outcome? Perhaps. But that's not a precedent any society should accept lightly. Then we come to magical portraits. At Hogwarts, paintings speak, move, and remember. They carry the essence of those they depict, often with a remarkable degree of accuracy. Dumbledore's portrait gives advice after his death. The Fat Lady denies entry to those she doesn't like. These portraits are more than art. They are sentient observers. What happens to privacy in a world where the walls have literal ears? In Order of the Phoenix, portraits spy for Umbridge. Filch relies on them for information. Again, no one asks if this surveillance is ethical. It is simply assumed to be part of life. The problem is not the existence of these magical tools. The problem is the absence of a framework to regulate them. If a wizard can cast Legilimens to read thoughts without the victim's knowledge, as Snape attempts on Harry, what protection exists for the mind? The mind is not a book, to be opened at will and examined at leisure, Snape says, but that is precisely what Legilimency allows. And while occlumency can defend against it, not everyone is capable of mastering such a discipline. Vulnerability becomes systemic. House elves, too, represent an overlooked facet of the issue. They can apparate within Hogwarts, something no wizard can do. They hear, see, and know more than any student or teacher realizes. Dobby reveals secrets about the Chamber of Secrets. Creature spills the prophecy to Bellatrix Lestrange. Their magical capabilities, combined with their subservience, make them perfect tools for espionage, and yet they are never protected, nor restricted, nor even included in ethical debates. Their will is not considered. Even owls, those stalwart messengers, are not secure. In Order of the Phoenix, we learn that the Ministry intercepts letters. All communication in and out of Hogwarts is being monitored, says Professor McGonagall. There is no warrant, no judicial oversight, just a blanket surveillance decree. Students' most intimate confessions to parents or friends are open to scrutiny. It is a gross invasion, yet normalized under the guise of security. Polyjuice Potion represents another violation. By impersonating someone, a wizard gains access to their life, secrets, and relationships. Barty Crouch Jr. deceives the entire school as Mad-Eye Moody. Hermione becomes Bellatrix Lestrange to infiltrate Gringotts. Ron, disguised as Reg Catamole, enters the Ministry. These transformations are not just physical, they exploit trust, they exploit proximity. And yet the potion is not banned. There is no law preventing its use outside of criminal enterprises. It exists in the margins. Even the infamous Howler is a violation in its own right, a screaming letter that exposes private reprimands in the most public way imaginable. Neville receives one from his grandmother, Ron from his mother. The message is not only heard but broadcast to anyone nearby. It is humiliation as punishment. But who asked if that should be acceptable? Who enforces any right to private correspondence? The invisibility cloak, one of the Deathly Hallows, further complicates things. While it saves lives, it also enables stalking, theft, and manipulation. Harry uses it repeatedly to eavesdrop and sneak. In Sorcerer's Stone, he hears Quirrell's secrets. In Chamber of Secrets, he investigates Malfoy. In Order of the Phoenix, he evades Umbridge. No one ever questions the ethics. The ends justify the means. But what if the person under the cloak had malicious intent? There are no magical consent laws, no expectation of privacy, no ministry office to investigate magical surveillance. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement focuses on crimes like unforgivable curses or misuse of wands. But what about mental violation? What about emotional intrusion? Rita Skeeter's articles, full of private information, are never challenged legally. She is only stopped when Hermione locks her in a jar. Imagine a world where your secrets are never yours, where your thoughts can be stolen, where your memories can be replayed. That is the world of wizards. It is not that they are cruel, it is that they are blind. They do not see the cost. Dumbledore, wise and compassionate, still peers into memories that are not his. Snape, bitter but brilliant, invades Harry's mind. Even heroes are guilty. The tragedy is that these violations are not anomalies. They are norms. Magical society lacks a concept of informational boundaries. There is no analogue to Muggle data protection laws, no legal defense against the magical equivalent of hacking or doxing. The wizarding world never had its Edward Snowden, no public reckoning, no reforms. And perhaps the greatest irony of all is that the same magic which violates can also protect. Charms like Fidelius or Muffliato offer shields, but only to those who know them. Only to those who trust the right people. For everyone else, exposure is a constant threat. Trust becomes a gamble. Silence becomes survival. In the end, the question is not whether magic can be ethical, it is whether wizards are ready to make it so. Until then, every mirror might be a window, every wall a whisper, every thought a target. And in that reality, privacy is not just endangered, it is extinct.